what is going, what is this damn thing doing with this? Thank you. Get the hell off my screen. I don't want you. Thank you. Okay. We got our quorum of 20. Let me zoom this up a little. Okay. Zoom this up a little. And if you see hair growing in my nose, that's your problem. Stop looking for hair up my nose. I'm glad I'm not bent over. Okay. Huh. Okay, yeah. I know about alcohol. I don't have any. Okay, guys. I promised earlier today that I would read some of this fascinating book. I'm going to hold it up again for everybody. It's called The Road to Disunion Volume 2. Road to Disunion Volume 2 by William W. Freeling. And it is a phenomenal book exposing slavery, race. It's so terrible, the shit that people were on in the past. It's amazing. I'm going to grab my cup of water and I'll be right with you. I realized I didn't bring it in. Or my cup of ice. Just one moment. Don't leave me. I expect to see 20 people. Can I come right back? White to you, brother. Brother Dome, I see you. Okay. The dust. Okay. All right. Good, the numbers went up. Okay. And I got some lemonade and an impotent can of bug spray. And I'm going to spray this shit out of that fly. Oh, God. Okay. Let me do a quick back review of this. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to do the inside. Inside jacket. Okay. I thank you on behalf of Angry Black Men's Book Club, all 20 some of us on here, and the 10 that are on here. Again, this is William W. Freeling's Road to Disunion, Volume 2, Secessionists, Triumphant. It is one of the great questions of American history. Why did Southern states bolt from the Union and help precipitate the Civil War? Now acclaimed historian William W. Freeling offers a new answer in the final volume of his monumental history, Road to Disunion. Here is history of the Grand Manor, a powerful narrative, people with dozens of memorable portraits telling this important story with skill and relish. Freeling highlights all the key moments on the road to war, including the violence in Bleeding, Kansas, Preston Brooks' beating of Charles Sumner, and he was his damn fly, of Charles Sumner in the Senate chambers, the Dred Scott decision, John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, and much more. As Freeling shows, the election of Abraham Lincoln sparked a political crisis, but at first most Southerners took a cautious approach, willing to wait and see what Lincoln would do, especially whether he would take any antagonistic measures against the South. But at this moment, the extreme fringe, damn this fly, I knew this motherfucker wants some attention, and he's gonna get it. Let me move my lemonade. He's gonna fuck with my lemonade. Damn. I'm trying like not to get no toxicity in this damn bug. He may fly in my stuff. I hope it's a real fly. I hope it's no CIA shit. Okay. He said the fringe of the South. Translation. Racist ass, black folk slaves forever type white folk. We're not going to support the damn Union. Okay? They had already made up their mind to fucking wreck the place. This is what was happening. And this is why I want to read this, because these people lied to you. The Civil War was all about white folks fighting over how badly they got to treat black people. This whole country is based on that. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Any white person that comes on this thing that's mouth off, I'm blocking you from the channel. Buy your own goddamn book and read for yourself. I want to make this clear. The Angry Black Men's Book Club is not here to educate anybody but black people. If other people listen, fine. You can chime in, but don't say anything anti-black or stupid. I don't care how long I've known you, how frequently I've seen you. If you do it, I will kick you off the platform forever. There are a billion places where you can hate and despise black people and the privacy of your own home, under aliases and everything else. You will not do it on this platform. Let them take the channel, I don't care. And so when I say something, it's historically sound. Okay, again, racist ass people in the South took charge, first in South Carolina and Mississippi, two of the most racist states in the country. But throughout the lower South, here comes this damn fly again. Damn. This thing is determined to get swatted. I gotta kill his ass. I was trying to get him my last thing. He is smart. I gotta have something to bop his ass with so I can be done with him. I'm sorry, I hate flies. Maybe it's because they're black. It's like, I just don't like flies. So I'm going to block her. I'm going to get her. So pray for me to kill this fly. Extreme French of the South took charge, but throughout the lower South, sounded the drum for secession. Secession means to secede, to leave, to break, to get a divorce from the Union. Right? Indeed, The Road to Disunion is the first book to fully document how this decided minority, a white minority, a racist, bigoted white minority, just like what we have now, the kind that need to kill people in grocery stores, the kind that need to kill people in churches, the kind that think you having a picnic is a threat to public safety, the kind that think that police have the right to execute people not committing crimes, the kind that give jobs to tens of millions of people in the country unlawfully and see no reason why you should have anything to survive on. Same minority. It's the same people. Nothing's really changed in this country, and we're going to have to change ourselves and change them. Small minority. A decided minority of Southern hotspurs took hold of the secessionist issue, aided by a series of fortuitous events, drove the South out of the Union. Freeling provides compelling profiles of the leaders of this movement, many of them members of the South Carolina elite. Let's just stop for a minute and say Tim Scott is a liar to his heart to say America's not a racist country when he's from racist-ass South Carolina. Knows damn well it's racist there, and it's racist everywhere. It's racist on the North Pole. It's racist on the South Pole. You didn't hear about the killing down there? It's racist. As long as you have a world overrun in white supremacy or some kind of tribalism, it's a racist world. And as far as we know, until we see changes, we have a right to have that opinion. Am I right or am I wrong? Somebody say amen. So these people did this. Throughout the narrative, he evokes a world of fascinating characters and places as he captures the drama of one of America's most important, and he says least understood, let's say least known or least acknowledged stories. You've been lied to. The Civil War is all about what they get to do to hurt black people. That's all it is. That's all it's ever been. Damn, I want to catch this fly. Whew. God, please. All right. I'm not going to read any more of that. I just want y'all to get an overview. And this is a big-ass book. Oxford University Press. Let me see. No, I don't want to do that. I want to get into right why we need, in part one, what was going on. Okay. So I'm going to go right to page 19. Page 19. Let me see. Should I do the prologue? Y'all want me to do the prologue? Who says do the prologue? Who says do the prologue? Because I feel like doing this. Here he goes again. Man, this thing will go. Prologue isn't that long. I'm going to do it anyway. Let's see. In the worst case scenario, let's take some time. There's a guy by the name of Yancey. Prologue is Yancey's Rage. By the middle of the 1850s, William Lowndes Yancey and fellow secessionists had suffered through 2 decades as a cornered minority. During this exasperating time, Yancey perhaps dreamed that he would someday help prod half of the South out of the Union. But the stymied Alabama extremists probably never imagined that he would surrender to reluctant secessionists when secession remained only half accomplished. Yancey's abdication occurred in Montgomery, Alabama, provisional capital of the Southern Confederacy. The capitulation transpired February 17th, 1861, eve of Jefferson Davis's inauguration as president of the half-formed nation. Yancey introduced Davis, who had opposed secession as late as December 1860 by declaring that the man and the hour have met. The extremist thereby bet his revolution on a National Democratic Party moderate. Such opponents of extremism had long kept revolutionaries at bay in the South. Mainstream politicians' leverage inside the South began with leverage inside the nation's majority party. For a quarter century, the Democratic Party's Southern establishment and Washington had secured many pro-slavery protections. With the Union fearing minority bulwarks, why gamble on disunion? Why doubly gamble on reckless leaders? Revolutionary hotheads had long been called fire eaters. Today we call them alt-right. Today we call them alt-right, right? Nasty. Even if fellow white folk know they're crazy, they knew it then. So a fire eater is like the people who did the Turner Diaries, William Turner, who wants a race war. And they'll do anything, anyone that's not just extremely just kill all the black folks, they attack them for not hating enough. It's a strong, and it has always been a strong impulse in the American nation of white American, Anglo-American Nazis, anti-black, racist Nazis, who don't even like other white people because they don't hate enough. And I can't emphasize enough, white unity is based on the hatred of black people. When they were in Europe, they were fighting and killing each other. In South Africa, the thing that kept them together is their hatred of the Africans. They don't like each other. They can't stand each other, but they hate us more. They created all these myths about blacks being monsters and rapists and criminals, and they can all come together. They don't have anything other than their hatred of us. That's it. They even called them fire eaters. With their fiery rhetoric, they sought to incinerate the Union, whatever the risk. The less agitated Southern majority craved cooler rulers, especially during the nervous revolutionary times. Even in South Carolina, the most disunionist state, cautious revolutionaries had to drive an outraged Robert Barnwell Rhett into the shadows before uneasy squires would dare disunion. Yancey, unlike Rhett, scored a revolutionary coup before succumbing to less revolutionary leaders. The subtle Alabamian, unlike the inflexible South Carolinian, saw how to turn mainstream Democrats' middle ground, same thing happening now, into extremist terrain. At the National Democratic Party's 1860 convention, Yancey used one of Jefferson Davis's watered-down pro-slavery crusades to strain the party past the breaking point, realizing that Davis's compromised Southern extremism might be too uncompromising for Northern moderates to swallow. So too, in February 1861, Yancey prayed that the president-elect Davis, reluctant rebel, could lure hesitant Southerners into revolution. With such leery revolutionaries directing the revolution, Rhett answered, "Fire eaters will only have changed masters." But in early 61, Yancey knew that fire eaters could not master the revolution. South Carolina's initial stake had been provoked. Only the most southernmost slaveholding states entered the rebellion. This so-called lower South included South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. Only in these 7 secessionist states did cotton reign as king. Slaves comprised almost half the population, and enslaved blacks outnumbered free blacks by more than 50-1. Twice as many Southerners resided in the less torrid, less enslaved, less secessionist Upper South, comprised of the border South and Middle South tiers of states. Okay, we're talking about Arkansas, Tennessee, North Carolina, Kentucky, Missouri, Maryland, Delaware. And with Virginia, you need to remember that includes what's now called West Virginia. When Yancey conceded the Disunion Revolution to Davis, 2 weeks before Abraham Lincoln's March 4th inauguration as President of the United States, the Middle South shunned the Lower South's republic, and the Border South had even less use for the Revolution. The borderland tier of Southern states located closest to the North included Delaware, Maryland, Kentucky, and Missouri. Here, the relatively few slaveholders almost never grew cotton. Here, 7 of the 8 residents were white, while 1 of the 5 blacks was free. Here, Yankee-style cities, immigrants, and industries were far more important than in the Lower South. Translation: where the complete economy depended on the enslavement, rape, abuse, murder of black people, nothing was shaking. The entire economy rested upon how our people were mistreated and worked to death and have nothing else. And they still don't have anything else 160 years later, 165 years later. It's still jacked up in Arkansas, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana. It still is, with the exception of maybe some oil and some tourism. Still, it ain't what it could be. 4 states in the Middle South: Virginia, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Arkansas lay between the border and between the lower and border Souths. The Middle South states contain aspects of colliding Southern culture above and below them. The Middle South fence sitters might rally behind the Lower South moderate, such as Jefferson Davis, but the Middle South shunned extremists, even an ultra like Yancey, who sometimes found judiciousness useful. Yancey looked more like a judicious moderate than a fanatical extremist. Small in height, he was large in the girth of his fat and the fat of his face. His half-closed eyes gave him a drowsy appearance. Under his jubbled chin, his bow ties flopped in puffy ribbons. Over his slumped posture, his suits crumpled in disarray. Since inflamed nerves tormented his ribs and spine, he hardly moved as he spoke. Because he had no front teeth, his soft voice barely sounded distinct. How could such a motionless drawl arouse the sleepy to fury? Because both Yancey's legend and his vocabulary screamed, the Yankees' libel demanding stinging retorts. According to the perhaps apocryphal legend, Yancey began storming at Northern insulters as an undergraduate. He then allegedly hurled a pickle barrel through the window at Williams College, the Massachusetts college that supposedly disciplined the Southern native whose aunt called him a youth of wild notions, who never could rest in one place 2 months at a time. The wild youth relied on his genial facade again a few months later when he gunned down his wife's uncle after an obscure affront. Still later, so he's a murderer, people, Yancey would end his career sprawled on the floor of the Southern Confederate Senate, blood spurting from his face, after a federal senator slit him with the jagged ink container. Whether he had insulted or suffered insult, whether the pickle barrels or inkwells or bullets augmented the wounding words, Yancey, the fire eater's most apparent but calm orator, and sometimes most disciplined tactician, always verged on reckless rage, sort of like storming the Capitol, people. Northern abolitionists, especially enraged the Alabamian, The South's self-proclaimed paternalists, including abolitionist sneers, presided not over Christian hearths, but over anti-Christian sewers. Slaveholders supposedly gutted black families by selling children from parents and parents from each other. The tyrants also allegedly trashed family life, white and black, by raping their female property. American slavery as it is, testimony of 1,000 witnesses dwelled on these abominations. In this best-selling American book, besides the Bible, Until Uncle Tom's Cabin, the American Anti-Slavery Society called slaveholders as dead to their slaves' domestic agony as if serviles were cattle. And the planters' houses testified a Connecticut visitor. I could distinguish the family resemblance in the slaves who waited upon the table. Female slaves commonly have white children, and little or nothing is ever said about it. According to another Connecticut traveler, slaves lived in a state of promiscuous concubinage. Their master said he took pains to breed from his best stock. The whiter the progeny, the higher they could sell for house servants. A borderite added that brothers and sisters, husbands and wives are torn asunder. In every neighborhood, village, or road, one observes a sad procession of manacled outcasts whose mournful countenances tell that they are exiled by the force of all that their hearts hold dear. By charging that slaveholders broke domestic hearts, abolitionists assaulted the slaveocracy where it had claimed to be most virtuous. Southerners entitled slavery the domestic institution. The title asserted that slave-holding patriots treated all lesser humans, whether children or wives or slaves, as esteemed family members. Yankee capitalists, according to the slaveholders' familial logic, had no familial compulsion about firing their employees or divorcing their wives. And now these anti-familial hypocrites curse the Southerners as family breakers. As William L. Yancey grew up, he closely observed a hypocrite who severed a family. Yancey's father died when the lad was 13 years old. The proud, penniless Yancey clan faced a bleak future, but soon had appeared the ancient South Carolina family's self-proclaimed savior, the Reverend Nathaniel Beeman, a migrant from the north who taught at Mount Zion Academy in Georgia. This zealot married the widow Miss Yancey when William was 7. Beeman scorned one possession of his new family. The preacher sold ex-Mrs. Yancey's 3 slaves, a mother and 2 infants. The black family brought $700. A year later, Beeman moved his white family to Troy, New York. There, Yancey's stepfather demanded that the National Assembly of the Presbyterian Church resolve that selling a human being as property in the sight of God, a heinous sin. Yancey recalled more than the moralists who pocketed $700 for indulging in heinous sin. Up in Troy, after Yancey's mother defended slavery as morally decent, Beeman banned her allegedly indecent opinion from his presence. He possibly beat her physically. He assuredly abused her verbally and sometimes nailed her in her room. Still, she called the domestic institution virtuous. Again, feminists support racism because they're white too. Only dumbass black feminists and fagonists support white female supremacy. I hope if you're one of those stupid ass people that you change. Beeman responded that her reconciliation of the pure system of Jesus Christ with the abomination of slavery was a complete failure. Beeman sent the Christian failure down to the barbarous South for a year and a half of reconsideration. The exiled wife sought to bury the hatchet by dividing the blame equally between us. I would be a fool or a knave, Beeman answered, to admit any part of the blame. Instead, all of our difficulties have commenced with yourself. His sole object has been to save your reputation and the character of the standing of my family in the Christian community. Since Satan had forever blinded her to virtue, this once beloved but fallen woman must stay in the South and keep quiet, so as the disgrace and turmoil occasioned by your conduct may die away. When Mrs. Beeman instead came back to Troy, her spouse barred her at the door. Yancey's mother spent the rest of her life wandering between other people's homes, ever battling Beeman to see their daughter. As she eked out a miserable subsistence, her condemner spent part of his pulpit time castigating slave sellers who smashed black homes. To emphasize his self-proclaimed moral ascendancy, Nathan Beeman savored a pulpit that made him seem taller, as he was a huge man with a tough square face, a stern expression, and spectacles that magnified his frowning eyes. When accused sinning by his wife's 3 slaves, he dismissed the insinuation. He merely swept the unchristian filth from his Christian home. Had he then been wrong to sweep his wife from her home? Of course not, he thundered. I shall never keep house with the servant of Lucifer a day while life lasts. Could the South reconcile white democracy and black slavery? Of course not, Beeman snarled. That brotherhood resembled an alliance between Jerusalem and Sodom, or a friendly league between the archangel and Lucifer, or the consummation of nuptials between heaven and hell. The slaveholders' loathsome political hypocrisy would make Benedict Arnold blush and lead Judas Iscariot to cast down 30 pieces of silver and go hang himself. Not for 100 pieces of gold could William Lowndes Yancey tolerate such slurs from such frauds. Whatever righteous Yankee heaped ridicule on Southerners, Yancey poured contempt right back. No American egalitarian could abide a critic's better than thou posture, nor could a slaveholder tolerate being labeled as scum. That epithet only fit slaves. With whites called morally filthier than slaves, Yancey the orator, that stationary drawler, needed no gestures, no scream to play on Southerners' prickly rectitude. In the South and in the North, too, this genial fanatic softly demanded that Southerners must be treated as Yankees' equals. Quote, do not destroy our self-respect, do not overtax our manliness, Yancey warned the citizens of Syracuse, New York, under 100 miles from Beeman and Troy. Do not walk in a field and tread on a caterpillar, he cautioned Boston abolitionists, or the poor creature will turn on your boot and try to sting you. By insisting that Southerners turn on stinging moral enslavers, Disunionists had long hoped to escape from the confinement at the edge of Southern politics. For years, Yancey had prayed the Southerners' fury at Yankee maligners. Would Sunday defeat the compromising Jefferson Davises, propel uncompromising revolutionaries to power, fuse one South out of many subregions and classes, and burn the Nathan Beemans in a firestorm of revenge? But the pre-war questions always remain, whether in the mid-1854 and early 1861, could most Southerners' hatred of Northern critics overcome their love of union, their dread of disunion, their divisions from each other, and their distrust of fire eaters. How y'all like that? Should I read more of this? Yeah, I am. I'm going to do this. This is called Better Economic Times Generate Worse Democratic Dilemmas. During the first 2 decades of the slavery controversy, 1835 to 1854, a huge majority of Southerners believed that William L. Yancey's counterproductively exaggerated the South's peril. Then, and by the mid to late 1850s, a more respectable minority of Southerners believed that the Secessionists offered a productive escape from imminent danger. That at the very time more Southerners saw themselves as disastrously afflicted politically, their economic afflictions largely lifted. Why should a sunnier economic outlook have coincided with the stormier political method, in part because the South's stormiest disunionists, the South Carolina aristocrats, enjoyed less of the brighter economic prospects, in part because Southern prosperity elsewhere widened the sections, provoking divisions, not only between contracting South Carolinians and the expanding of Southwesterners, but also between slaveholders and non-slaveholders, between the Black Belt and White Belt areas, between the Lower South and the broader South. Meanwhile, at the very time Southern divisions widened, Northern antagonism swelled. Never had the minority of masters in the South, or in the majority of Southerners, a minority of the Southerners in the Union, or a minority of South Carolinians in the masters class felt so vulnerable, defending an unrepublican institution inside of a Republican government. I must take 1 second. I need to do 2 things. I'll be right back. Give me a second, and I promise not to interrupt for at least a half an hour to an hour. Give me 1 second. I hope y'all listening to this. Okay, we back in. It just got hot up in this Johnson, these lights. All right, we're in chapter 1. Democracy and Despotism, 1776-1854, Road, Volume 1 Revisited. As in the Road to Disunion, Volume 1, let us focus on the immersion of the world's most powerful slaveholders in the world and the world's most advanced republic, for that phenomenon most paved the southern road to disunion. From the moment that road began amidst the American Revolution, Republican ideology and government posed special threats to despotism and anti-Republican despotisms to anti-Republicans' essence. Yet the American Republican system also lent special protections to an aggressively defensive slaveocracy. The dialectic between extra threats, and extra protection tipped towards the slaveholders safely until the middle 1850s. Translation. This so-called free, fair, just, constitutional, all of this stuff was tilted in favor of basically black people getting fucked. From 1776 to 1854, the system was rigged for us to get screwed. The people that were getting paid screwing us, they literally compromised everything to make a certain group of very rich people who were making their money screwing black people happy, even if it compromised everything the country's supposed to stand for. And things haven't changed much philosophically. Then the balance shifted at the very time slaveocracy's internal divisions widened. So as things began to move away from the majority of power being with folk whipping and raping and enslaving black folks, stuff began to change, and then they began to fight each other. So you know what you have to do. You have to double down on hating black people. That is the white man's escape hatch. Blame, hate, just hate black folk more. The economy is bad, it's DEI. If Wall Street has bad loans, it's bad black borrowers that didn't pay back, not the creation of a fraudulent system of Nina. No income, blah, blah, blah. Nina loans, liar loans, they call. This is how this thing works. Whether Republican rule over whites required free speech and the consent to be governed, dominion over blacks invited dictatorial compulsions and the coercion of the non-consenting. The slaveholders needed an almighty color line, American apartheid people, to keep such unreconcilable regimes severed. But the color line leaked. Whites freed some blacks. Some citizens became so-called poor white trash, trashier than the slaves. Some masters used supposedly inferior blacks to direct their slaves. Many enslavers inhibited the white anti-slavery debate, lest the enslaved, so the citizens challenged despotism's compatibility with democracy. At their most undemocratic, white censors deployed lynch mobs, anti-participating in the most savage post-war South's terrorizing. Yet the Democrat and the slaveholder resisted physical violence against white citizens. Rather than impose lynch law, the establishment preferred nonviolent pressure to conform, especially the accusation that the hesitation about pro-slavery tactics revealed softness on slavery. So if you don't hate to the degree that we say hate, something's wrong with you. When I say hate niggas, you do it. Every 4 years in presidential campaigns and whenever agitation about slavery threatened, Southern politics featured loyalty finger-pointing. Accusations of traitor became rife and politically lethal. The slave-holding Democrat found that the relentless brutalization of slaves as repulsive as the relentless lyncher of citizens. Masters preferred to control their slaves with familial kindness, Christmas presents, and soothing concessions, especially the granting of private garden plots. Slaves, mastering their job of wrenching maximum concessions from would-be paternalists, often played the role that slave masters desired. They pretended to love their patriarch and to consent just like citizens to his supposedly fatherly dominion. He's talking about cooning. Sometimes the pretense edged towards reality, both among the charade of would-be fathers and would-be boys. The ideal master's most revealing word for his idle servant was not boy, not even Sambo, but Cuffy. Just cuff a childish black, declared the condescending word, and he will become that allegedly impossibility, the consenting slave. But most often, Cuffy and master's roles slipped, relied on duplicity on both sides of the color line. Dubious paternalists regularly faced exasperating slave lies, misunderstood orders, slovenly work, and dark glances. Occasionally, all pretenses altogether disappeared. In the 19th century, massive slave revolts almost never ripped apart the Massa Cuffy charade. The last slave revolt, Nat Turner's in 1831, came to seem ages ago, but individual slaves who ambushed masters were not rare. Individual slave runaways were not rare at all, especially in the South, closest to the North. Thus, master faced the impossible, indispensable task of discovering whether Cuffy's act of consent was true blue. The underlying here taught the superior that life was a charade, that professions of loyalty must be scrutinized, that affections of friendship must be doubted. Cuffy's lessons bore painfully on loyalty politics among whites. Southern politicians' extravagant professions of love for slavery might be a charade as the Northerners' declaration of true blue friendship. Who could trust a Yankee conman after experiencing Cuffy, the ultimate pretender? To live with Cuffy was to disbelieve the world out there. Thus did the master form the slave, and the slave form the master. The two together generate a hothouse culture, too dictatorial to be comfortably democratic. The discomforts of 1860 took centuries to become consuming. Early English migrants to the future United States areas comfortably planted slavery inside the most Republican for white men New World society, for almost no one yet considered slavery a problem. 17th century British Republicans, the most advanced in the old world, came in far larger numbers compared to the non-white native or imported people than did white European colonists to the other New World slaveocracies. With their late 18th century Declaration of Independence, especially its announcement that all men were created equal, this most Republican concentration of ex-Europeans theoretically gave equal rights to all humans, whatever their race, sex, or economic position. Then the compatibility of despotism and democracy became a widely perceived problem. Black slavery pockmarked all 13 of England's revolting colonies in 1776. Indeed, slavery's contagion spread in an odd New World direction away from North America's most tropical habitats. True, in 1776, slavery already massed thickest in the constricted Georgia and especially South Carolina coastal swampland. Here, dense concentrations of slaves tilled rice and a rare silk-like fleece called Sea Island cotton. Here, an especially top-heavy social structure lent an especially intractable aristocratic mentality to the slaveholder as a Republican. But rice and Sea Island cotton only flourished in a few dozen miles of the Atlantic Ocean. Few 18th century entrepreneurs could envision a staple to grow in thousands of miles west of the coastal strips. At first, capitalists considered the lower South too far north to grow the lush South American money crops, coffee and sugar. The lower South also seemed to be too far south to grow the upper South's crucial cash crop, tobacco. With white capitalists considering the lower South's western expanse relatively unpromising in 1776, 3 times more slaves grew tobacco and grains in the Middle South Virginia and in the border South Maryland than toiled in Georgia and South Carolina. Furthermore, many more slaves grew grains in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York than inhabited all of the lower South areas west of the U.S. coastal jungles. But slavery also a New England legality in reality. The institution was as national as the American Revolution. Slavery also posed the greatest national embarrassment to those who would build a nation atop the Declaration's foundations. The more northern of the original 13 states, by striking against the embarrassment, first indicted slavery's special peril in Republican America. But the qualified nature of the first strike also indicated slavery's special strength in this especially Republican for white men culture. Pennsylvania scored an auspiciously blunted first strike. The state's legislature passed the New World's first anti-slavery law in 1780. This path-breaking edict, however, liberated only blacks born after the enactment and only after the afterborn reached 28 years of age. The law indirectly consigned all slaves born to 1780 to permanent thraldom. The edict also freed no slave until a third of a century after the American Revolution. Blacks' prospect in the largest northern slave state, New York, remained still bleaker. New York's legislature, acting 2 decades after Pennsylvania, also freed only the afterborn and only after they reached the adulthood. This legislation, intended to liberate no one until a half century after the American Revolution, ultimately failed to free a third of its intended belated beneficiaries. Many New York masters sold slaves down south into permanent enslavement before emancipating birthdays. In 1827, New Yorkers freed their last remaining slave. Then New Jersey still had 2,200 and Pennsylvania had 400 slaves. Northern slavery persisted partly because natural rights to property countered natural rights to liberty. Northern slaveholders fought to delay or to circumvent the seizure of their human property. Their persistence helped delay an uncompromising attack on Southern slavery. Finally, in 1831, a whopping 55 years after the Declaration of Independence and 4 years after New York became altogether free soil, Massachusetts' William Lloyd Garrison used his new liberator to pledge an all-out attack on U.S. slavery. True to Garrison's pledge, the growth rate of Northern abolition led the New World for a decade. But after this auspicious beginning, the U.S. abolitionists hit a wall around 1840. No more than 2% of pre-war Yankee voters ever demanded that slavery be wiped out of Southern states. No more than 2%. My family never owned slaves. That means basically 98% of white folks where slavery wasn't even around were pro-slavery. Don't ever let anybody tell you, everybody white was in on it, unless they're an abolitionist, you're guilty. Collectively blame white people for this. They were all down with this. Once again, the Republican ideology proved to be a two-edged anti-slavery sword. While slaves' natural right to liberty sharpened the thrust for emancipation, slaveholders' natural right to property blunted the emancipators' parries. Furthermore, the Garrisonian army, where the white women and blacks fought alongside white men, violated the no trespass sign of American republicanism. Quote, only white men shall govern. Garrisonians, female agitators, enraged male chauvinists who believed that women must only speak in the home. Black agitators also infuriated white supremacists who believed that the supposedly inferior race must only assume menial positions. Worse still for U.S. abolitionists, most Northerners equated American republicanism with white men's union. Southerners, by threatening to break up the Union, aroused Northerners against the abolitionist plea for liberty. Furthermore, few Yankees wanted liberated blacks in their neighborhood. They hoped to deport freedmen to Africa, just as Native Americans had been exiled to Western reservations. Then all Americans would be liberated and really white. They'd make America great again. The perversive racism heaped crushing burdens atop the Garrisonians' drive to liberate all humans. The burden afflicted the National Congress as much as state legislatures. The first generation of national congressmen, impelled in part by the Declaration's ideology, helped ease the national institution into a Southern peculiarity. The Congressional Northwest Ordinance of 1787 barred future slaves from 5 future Midwestern states. Then the national government abolished the African slave trade in 1807. Slaveholders stood proscribed from taking or importing new slaves into half of the nation's territory and from importing overseas slaves. Yet, if the first national leaders helped corner an underpopulated slaveocracy, they also helped arm the slaveholder defense. While the Congressman of 1787 banned new slaves from entering the Northwest Territories, they emancipated no slave already on the ground. The result, persisting Illinois slaveholders led to an ominous, albeit failed, drive to perpetuate the system in the 1820s. The founders also expanded the white men's republic southward without ensuring that only free Republicans could enter. The result, slaveholders enslaved the National Republic's vast new tropical empire. President Thomas Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase and President James Monroe's Florida Purchase added a slave power colossus to the United States. The future states of Louisiana, Florida, Arkansas, Missouri, and parts of Mississippi and Alabama. A late 18th century invention enabled the Founding Fathers' new Lower South Empire to become the 19th century slaveocracy's new core. In the 1790s, Eli Whitney, I don't believe that. It says, and others. Those others are the black people he stole it from. Invented cotton gins to process a more common crude product than Sea Island cotton, a short staple cotton fiber. Slave labor then became profitable, and the previously apparently useless lower South areas west of the Atlantic coast swamps, including the upcountry of South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, and after annexation in 1845, Texas. Meanwhile, short staple cotton cultivation also triumphed in the Middle South, western Tennessee, and Arkansas. Furthermore, a lush sugar empire belatedly flourished in the lower South, Louisiana. No longer did slavery's base swell northward in Virginia and Maryland's tobacco belts. No longer did only the Georgia and South Carolina coastal swamps nurture the lower South core of slaveholders. The slaveholding establishment had to become thinner northward to become thicker southward. After the federal government closed the overseas slave trade, lower South slaveholders could not legally import Africans. Instead, black laborers, some 875,000 of them, and that's an estimate, it's probably more, they never give us good numbers, from 1800 to 1860, drained to the newer South from the older South, from South Carolina, Virginia, and especially the border South. While slaves had been 25% of the border South population of 1790, they comprised only 13% in 1860, as compared to 32% in the Middle South and 47% in the Lower South. While in 1790, 21% of Southern slaves had lived in the lower South, 59% lived in the area in 1860. After this sea change in the slaveholders' geographical base, could the slave power's expanding power in the tropical habitat sufficiently offset its shrinking power in old northern bastions? It was a classical question in human affairs, whether a shrinking unconsolidated periphery could do in an expanding consolidated core. In this case, much depended upon whether the border South slaveholders, now located at North America slavery's most northern outpost, could cling to their regime more interminably than had the hard-fighting, belatedly extinguished New York and Illinois slaveocracies. Few questions better define the road to disunion or the path to Appomattox. I should bop his ass. I think I got him. I'm sorry. This fly wants to... Shit, I need to give him a channel. He needs his own channel. I hope I got his ass. I can't tell. Okay. In the most northern South, no border state emulated Pennsylvania's or New York's emancipation edicts, although Delaware came close, and in every border state legislature debated the possibility. More often, border masters manumitted some slaves. Slaveholder expediency augmented anti-slavery principle. Borderland blacks, compared to blacks in the deeper South, could more easily dash onto northern free soil. That reality led some border masters to grant eventual freedom if slaves accepted temporary enslavement. In this semi-slavery system, this is the beginning of the black middle class, the shit that you and I are in. Semi-slavery. Let's be real about this. Masters bribed slaves against gambling on flight by promising to grant manumission after a term, usually 7 years of loyal labor. The advantage for the slave, certain eventual freedom rather than the uncertainties of flight, perhaps capture, and then assuredly awful punishment. The advantage for the master, profitable interim labor rather than the peril of an investment and tomorrow vanished. The disadvantage for the whole South, partial erosion of slavery and the borderlands. So in other words, we don't want your niggas to be happy. That makes our niggas want. So we need everybody to be miserable everywhere so we can have our fucked up system of racism and slavery. So don't be too nice to black people. Ours are going to want us to be nice too. That's how it is. By 1850, erosion had proceeded furthest in the eastern borderlands. At mid-century, 89% of Delaware blacks, and I'm going to put this number in, 75 to 80% of blacks in Washington, D.C. 45% of Maryland blacks were free. Manumission occurred far less often in the western borderlands at mid-century. Only 3% of Missouri blacks and only 5% of Kentucky blacks enjoyed freedom. Still, Kentucky contained 5 times more white non-slaveholding than slaveholding families. Missouri 6 times more. Borderland slavery's erosion could deepen if the border South investors more swiftly cashed in. He's back. More swiftly. Ooh, can't stand this thing. more swiftly cashed in on the exposed human property in lower South auctions as had so many New Yorkers. Nothing would sour borderland slave investors faster than a rash of slave runaways. The peril again showed how blacks conditioned whites. Just as Cuffees turned slaveholders into highly suspicious agitators, so runaways turned pro-slavery politicians into champions of an iron curtain between the most exposed South and the more libertarian North. From 1836 through 1854, the increasingly demanding Southern minority won many border consolidations over the protests of an increasingly awakened Northern majority. Majoritarian government often yields minority control, especially when committed minorities face sleepy majorities. A good example, how the majority of we stupid ass black Americans let a minority of Boule Negroes push us towards genocide and extermination, and they were all out pushing for Kamala or pushing for Obama or pushing for Biden or pushing for stupid stuff from Republicans, a few, but let's just stay with the Democratic Party because that's what we are. It's just a few of them that are pushing illegals, promoting gays, fighting for an anti-crime bill for Asians, and don't do shit for 95% of us. We're an example of a people where a fraction of sellout traitor black people are destroying us, and our asses are sleeping, or we're going to see Beyonce or Sexy Red or some other stupid shit. We want to go to a Diddy freak off. White folk have been sorry and lazy too, but they wake up. I don't know what the hell, I don't know. Y'all may as well, y'all like tats or a concentration camp tattoo, especially if it looked good, a whole lot of y'all would like it. I'm convinced of it. I don't have any doubts anymore in my mind of how fundamentally mentally weak and slave-like the vast majority of black Americans are. We can only kill each other over the smallest slight insult, but would never raise a weapon in self-defense of a collective. That's why we're weak, and no one respects that. People should hate us because we're like this. We've invited the hatred. It's our fault. A majority. Again, a majoritarian government often yields minority control, especially when a committed minority faces sleepy majorities. When a handful, these Greek letter freaks and nasty people and all these fucked up individuals run our black community against what we want, and you can't get people. They don't vote, they don't go to meetings, they get high, they fuck, they shit. I mean, you could get that out of a garden slug. Just gonna put that out there. But U.S. Republicanism handed the slaveholders extra power to combat any Yankee majority. Since the racist Northern majority cared more about the white men's union than about republicanism for non-whites, slaveholders' threat of this union could secure national protections for slavery. The National Democratic Party, the shit that Jasmine Crockett, same shit. National Democratic Committee, same shit. National Democratic Party let... Damn, I get this can so I can zap this thing. I hate flies. I genuinely do. Y'all have no idea. Y'all are seeing the real me. I hate flies. Damn, I hate. And this shit will not. This motherfucker's annoying. And anyway. Let me just deal with this, because this fly has worked the hell out of me, man. Damn, I want to kill this thing. Okay. Racists cared more, right? The National Democratic Party lent the slaveholders' threats added leverage. Democrats usually won national elections. For all of y'all that are going to vote in 26. They almost always ran strongest in the South, especially in the deepest South. So the majority section wielded the power base of the majority party. When Southern Democrats threatened to quit the party unless Northern allies supported a pro-slavery law, enough Northern Democrats tended to give in, not only to save the Republic, but also to save their party. These days, the CBC, black people to save this fucking Democratic Party always go for white supremacy against the black collective. That's around reparations and everything else. And until, I repeat, we need some black fire eaters. I'm talking about somebody like Maxine Waters. That wig should get snatched off in the airport. What harm would it do if someone like busted her with, an egg or something? I'm not talking about kill her. I got her. No more interruptions. Praise God. Oh, I thank Him. Don't get me to get my tambourine out. Got your ass. Same way. At first you don't succeed. Try again. It's our fault. These folks, they wanted a bloody civil war just to dog out black people. You can't even get people to snatch a wig, to pop someone with some flour, to turn your back on them if they show up at an event, or go to a community meeting and yell and scream at their asses, for them to be afraid to come out in public. We have almost 70 blacks in Congress now. They don't fear us, and they're helping to destroy us, and we think they're cool. What, because they have some orgies and shit during the Congressional Black Caucus weekend? Yes, they do. Long before Diddy's ass did it, too. Long before. Diddy may have learned this shit down here in nasty-ass D.C. I'm trying to tell y'all something. Please sit my chair. I'm trying to tell you. I'm not lying for anything. I don't want to fucking go to the parties. I didn't want to go to that shit in the 80s. I don't want to go now. Some nasty, vile shit. I could have been, How can people go to an orgy and could smell of asses and all that kind of shit in it? Your leadership, your brave civil rights leadership, they freed us. You fucking kidding me? To save their party. All of this is saving a party that helped illegals, and our folks have been put out in the streets. That ugly Edward G. Robinson looking bitch, Karen Bass. And she's a Delta. All of you black Greeks, y'all are traitors to your race. In other communities, when this kind of stuff goes on, look at Vietnamese, they're not kind. They hang people, they go after your family. I'll know that black people are serious about freedom when folks start having shit happen to them. I'm not talking about necessarily, I'm not talking about kill nobody, but if you're a coon pastor, you go and there's nobody in your church no more. You're a black politician and all of a sudden, you can't, nobody invites you to anything. You don't get, people go after folks who give you money. Your kids come home crying, everybody hates me. They say that you're a traitor. You're helping to kill black people for white people. Nobody, I just want to kill myself. Why, Mom? Why do you guys have no black dignity? Nobody wants to sleep with me. I grew up with white people. That's what white folks did to white folks that didn't toe this line I'm talking about. White kid, be nice to me. Folk want to go beat up their mother and father. Why is your kids playing with niggas? Well, I'm going to fight you. White folks hold you accountable about the stuff they're on. We black people let everything go. We don't have any standards, nothing. That's part of our weakness. Yes, I'm lecturing. Have some standards. A lot of folk didn't want to be slaves once they had a standard. You believe in right and wrong. Anyway, let me get back to the book. To save their party, to save another group of people. The U.S. Constitution augmented the minorities' leverage. The Constitution's so-called 3/5 clause added 3 out of every 5 non-voting slaves to the state's number of voting citizens when determining the state's proportion of the members of the House of Representatives. So the South in 1860 with 29% of the nation's voting citizens elected 38% of the House. Moreover, each state elected 2 senators. Since the northern states outnumbered the southern states by only 2, the southern 29% of the U.S. white population elected 47% of the U.S. Senate in 1860. In addition, each state received 1 member of the Electoral College, the body electing the president for each senator and congressman. So the South's 3 in 10 white American voters elected 4 of 10 Electoral College voters. As an added bonus, disproportionate Southern control of the White House and Congress yielded disproportionate control over the Supreme Court. All this extra power, beyond 1 citizen, 1 vote, inspired the North's most loaded political term, slave power, meaning that the slaveholders possessed arguably unrepublican power over whites. I keep telling you, states' rights. No, this is about the violation of human rights of blacks and whites, because these people own blacks as subhuman slaves. The U.S. constitutional amendments process guarded the slave power's power. As William Lloyd Garrison conceded, the federal government would need a constitutional amendment to abolish slavery. 3/4 of existing states had to approve constitutional amendments. In 1860, the nation contained 17 free labor states and 15 slave states. If all 15 slave states perpetually rejected anti-slavery, only a union swollen to 60 states, 45 of them free labor states, could have forced abolition upon the South. And some future century, the Union might belong to 60 states. No such gargantuan swelling could be imagined in the mid-19th century. Thus, an anti-slavery constitutional amendment required some Southern consent. If the 4 border states had consented to emancipation, slaveholders would have had been sliced to 11 states and free laborers boosted to 21. Subsequently, if 12 more free labor states had been admitted to the Union, and the free labor states' 3/4 majority in a 44-state union could have imposed emancipation on the minority, the 44th state would have been admitted to the Union in 1890, 2 years after Brazil, the New World's last slaveholding nation, abolished the institution. That impossible road to emancipating a constitutional amendment could have been imagined in 1860. If slaveholders had lost the 4 border states, they would have lost control of the Congress long before they lost the power to kill constitutional amendments. Several key antebellum slaveholder victories, especially the annexation of Texas in 1845, required almost a unanimous Southern congressional contingent. That necessity left U.S. slaveholders only as politically strong as their weakest link. Their border South hinterland area, where more slaves ran towards the north, where more slaveholders sold slaves towards the deepest South, and where by 1850 the percentage of slaveholding families had sunk to under 12% of the total white families. Let me stop there. There's some coon-ass niggas saying only 1.5% of whites own slaves in the United States. But he doesn't explain to you that that's the United States as a total, instead of where our people were in the killing fields of the South, where, 12%, 30% of white folks own somebody. Don't ever let anybody lie to you about statistics. In the South, everything rested on it. If you didn't own a black, you wanted to. You were somehow connected to how black folks were mistreated. Everybody, even broke-ass white people. 12% of these families. So basically, over 10. Look, and when you consider 12% of the families, if you start thinking that that's just the total number of families, but how many people in those families? So it doesn't really give you a fair understanding of the population involved in slaveholding. So you're talking about the father, but what about the wife? And what about the kids? So 12% isn't the total number of people intimately involved with holding black people as chattel slaves. Don't ever let anybody lie to you. This was the biggest business in America, and all of them are guilty. The same way everyone black gets profiled, we have to profile you. If your family's been in this country for any period of time, you're somehow involved with the enslavement of our people. There's just no way around. If you're up north making shoes and tools and shit to supply the South, you're involved. We don't sit up and quibble over German people's support of Hitler. We shouldn't quibble over how many of them supported our people being mistreated. Like I read earlier, only 2% of them were opposed to our enslavement. It's almost a total score. 100% of white folk almost on the wrong side of history and have stayed there. Don't even play that game. Non-slave holding majorities commanded not only the border South, but most southern areas. Only 1/3 of all citizens Southwide owned slaves. 1/3, okay? But that means 30% or 33%, but how big was that family? Y'all get me? 1/3. But wherever whites extensively owned blacks in so-called black belt areas, the regime locally, like slaveholders nationally, exerted far more power than the minority numbers indicated. In the black belt neighborhoods defined here as communities with a population of 25% or more enslaved, rich and poor whites alike worshipped at the same churches, cherished the same family circles, relished the same political parties, nurtured the same crops, with the squire often helping rednecks by ginning their cotton or buying their foodstuffs or loaning them small sums. Here, all whites helped control blacks. I'll read it again. All whites helped control blacks, whether by voting for orthodox candidates or by expelling abolitionist meddlers or by lashing disobedient slaves when working on nightly patrols. In other words, being race soldiers. All of them are guilty. Every single solitary one. Don't split hairs anymore. They don't split hairs over whether you're a barbarian or a monkey or an ape. They don't. They don't split hairs over DEI or you got some weed in your car. We need to stop splitting hairs. This is a overall thing white folk got together on against us on. And we need to be real about that. Everybody's guilty. Here, all whites helped in chain blacks, stormed at Yankees who damned slavery perpetrators. Again, all whites. That's what it reads. Rednecks and neighboring squires also shared the responsibility to perpetuate paternalism in their homes, whether by directing supposedly inferior blacks or by governing supposedly inferior wives and children. Paternalism is another way of saying racism. All of them. ALL, like the little dish, like the laundry detergent. The operative word, all. Stop looking for excuses. In plantation neighborhoods, slaveless whites, while only aspiring to be slaveholders, already savored some slaveholders' sexist and racist power because they beat, raped, and cheated and dogged black folks too. Real talk. Whites' 19th century egalitarian Republican ideology also fused rich and poor in the black belt area. The poorest citizen relished his white skin, which allegedly made him the equal of all white males and superior to all blacks. Proudly equal plebeians could not bear holier than thou Yankees with their posture of moral superiority to all who helped enslave blacks, nor could rednecks tolerate any abolitionist effort to raise black slaves to the level of white citizens. Egalitarianism, the great reason why some colorblind Yankees opposed slavery, was also one of the great reasons why racist whites masked to keep blacks ground under. Whites masked. All together, all of them were in on this. Lost cause. Well, they were fighting for states' rights. No, you're fighting to be better and to destroy and enslave, and one day maybe you could whip and rape your blacks. That's why your ass got shot at Pickett's charge. And it was God's divine will didn't get enough of y'all because y'all went back and lynched and killed people. Sure, I said it. The most superficial question about the Old South is why slaveholders in the Black Belt supported slaveholders. The better question is why any non-slaveholder who lived among numerous blacks would want the despised lower class to be freed. The psychological wages of being a white man were too treasured among poor whites, and the sting of the abolitionists' lordly presumption too wounding, and the fear of competing with free blacks, in other words, the incompetent, stupid, inferior blacks, head to head, you'd lose to them. So you don't ever want them to have a chance because you're inferior as a white person. You know it. And this is why you need something to be artificially made inferior to you, or you just can't face life. Okay, you got to do a Dylan Roth. You need a Turner Diary. You need to be in some hate. You need to move to fucking Idaho. Sure, I said it. Fear of competing. Pro sports, DEI, wherever is a point where something may be asked of you and the person don't look like you can't face it. For them to turn against the slaveholders to be inviting in the Black Belt. The possibilities of yeomen's ordinary farmers, right? Yeoman resistance to slaveholders increase wherever few slaveholders or blacks resided. The sections areas with 5% or less slaves, here called the White Belt South, stretch past its border's southern core to cover the most mountainous sections of the Middle South, including Western Virginia and Eastern Tennessee, and of the lower South, including northern Georgia and northern Alabama. Here, white belt non-slaveholders lacked black belts non-slaveholding reasons for pro-slavery zealotry. Here, few rednecks knew blacks to loathe and to police. Here, few yeomen encountered slaveholders to visit and to emulate. Here, whites usually cared more about preserving the Union than about preserving slavery. Here, most citizens, like Northerners, would have preferred to rid the nation of slavery if they also could be rid America of blacks and retain the Union of whites. And in this white borderland between the Black Belt South and the free labor North, few whites lamented the slave drain continued to thin out blacks of their area and to thicken the institution in the most southern South, repeating the turtle slow erosion of slavery and the most southern North between 1776 and 1830. Concern about pressure on the most exposed parts of the South precipitated every successful Southern deployment of national leverage, always aimed at shutting down democratic agitation, where yeomen and cufflies might wish to be free of slave power. Notice it said democratic agitation where yeomen, which means they didn't even want freedom for poor whites. And so poor whites actually supported a semi-slavery as long as they weren't chattel slaves like blacks. Let's see how these people handle all the benefits that are going to be cut with 2025. Let's see how when people in West Virginia and East Tennessee can't get any benefits and they get cut off and the crazy checks stop because you're on fentanyl and all the other new drugs. There's a new opioid out here that I need to just talk to y'all about. I was talking to Jaguar, and then I didn't even get into it today, but I'll just bring it up because y'all need to know about it. I'm going to just bring this up and I'm going to type it up. There is a class of synthetic opioids called nitazines that have been around since the 1950s. And they're anywhere from 20 to 100 times stronger than fentanyl. And all that means is if you start snorting or shooting it, I'm going to put it up here for y'all to see up on StreamYard. Don't get mad at me. I'm just trying to tell you. And for all those stupid black junkies, you got to buy dope. Nobody's been able, my parents 50 plus years ago were trying to help get people off drugs. All of those black junkies, y'all want to be slaves to the dope man. Y'all got to drink and smoke and whore and queer yourselves out of existence. They have a plan to kill your asses off. Okay? And this shit's going to kill a lot better than the shot. They're called nitazines. I'm going to read some of this. I'm going to go back to this because this is slavery too. And a lot of your dumbasses are on it. Here we go. Nitazines are a class of potent synthetic opioids developed in the 1950s, but were never approved for medical use due to their high potential for overdose. They're now emerging in the illicit drug supply, posing a serious threat to public health. Nitazines are extremely potent, with some being hundreds to thousands of times stronger than morphine and even more potent than fentanyl. This high potency makes them especially dangerous, increasing the risk of overdose and overdose mortality. Nitazines are appearing in various forms of illicit drugs, powders, pills, and sprays. They can be found in pure form or mixed with other drugs like fentanyl, heroin, methamphetamine, and counterfeit pills. My friends, they already know that if you have this Narcan, you may need several Narcans to resuscitate someone. If you just have one can, you're going to be ass out if you see someone. Expect large numbers of people to die. A lot of them will be black junkies that you can't reach. A lot of them will be white throwaway people that nobody cares. Well, you and I care, those of us that do, but if you don't love yourself and a racist society, you're just roadkill. Again, shutting down democratic agitation where yeomen and cuffies might wish to be free of slave power. The gag rule debates. This went longer than the time he gave, but that's all right. The gag rule debates, 1835, 1844. Southerners sought to silence the congressional discussion of slavery in Washington, D.C. itself, neighboring the border south. When Secretary of State Abel P. Upshur first precipitated the Southern Texas annexation issue, the Virginians sought to seal off the English agitators from the relatively lightly enslaved for a lower South region, Texas Republic, and thus from the U.S. slaveocracy southwest border. When Senator James Mason of Virginia precipitated the fugitive slave controversy of 1850, he sought to stop the hemorrhage of slaves from his states and the South's northwest extremity. When Senator David R. Atchison of Missouri precipitated the Kansas-Nebraska Act, he sought to solidify the institution on his border state's western flank. The gag rule, quickly, was in the 1830s and 40s. white man abolitionist gave a prayer, and he called Southerners sinners. And these people, and the word of God is real, and God is real, and the Bible's true. And for all little fake ass black folks who consider yourselves woke, the Bible shit is what really, really pissed off. Really pissed off white people during the abolition period. It's the authority that God says it's wicked. This is what these people reacted to, being told that they're vile, that they're sinners, that they're going to hell. And I don't see no other book or any other thing that really gets under people's skin like telling them that they're going to hell and God don't like them. That's what, so someone gave a prayer and they literally shut down the discussion of slavery and black people for practically 8 years in the U.S. Congress because people's feelings got hurt. These same folks raping, killing, gibbeting, and torturing people can't stand to hear that they're wicked and God's going to get them. I think that's a damn good book. And if your asses haven't read it, you don't believe it, you're sorry. Your ancestors would count on people that did read it and practiced it the right way to do something to change their situation. So atheistical niggas irk me. I don't like you. And y'all deserve to go to hell for all the suffering that the righteous black folks have done. I'm not talking about the crooked ass ones you give money and you buy jets for, but the ones doing the right thing. And it's interesting, the same way black women don't pick good black men, we don't pick decent religious people to talk to or interface or work with. And that's a damn choice. You're responsible for the company that you keep. If you want to follow a crooked ass, nigga with a lisp like T.D. Jakes or strange ass Kamal Bryant, there's something wrong with him. Don't tell me that's God. That's you wanting to find someone as wicked and vile as you to get behind in more than one way. That's what the slave thing was about. They brought Texas into the Union. There's people trying to do that. It's right there. Kansas, Nebraska, we'll get into that more, where white folks started killing each other, and a certain way, oh happy day. At least they weren't bothering us, right? After each proposal to fortify the hinterland of the slaveholders against democratic agitation, some Southern leaders doubted that the proposed remedy could shore up the slaveocracy's peripheral areas. So again, they're talking about the gag rule. They're talking about fighting for Texas to come in as a massive slave state. They're talking about, it was called popular sovereignty for Kansas, where if there are enough people that want slavery and they have the votes, then you're going to have slavery. We don't care about the Missouri Compromise, where there wouldn't be slavery above the latitude 3620, whatever. Again, this stuff keeps coming back to black people getting fucked over and used because we drove the economy of this country. We built this damn country. It's built off of our blood, and many of us who are at least half indigenous, like I am, this is our goddamn land too. Okay, I don't hate nobody in Africa. I love everybody, but damn it, my mama looks like a fucking Indian. So does all the other people in my family. We close in to the Indians. For the little nigga that told me, little fat bitch, you know who you are, that said I'm trying to take somebody else's land, bitch. My people from here. Why would I lie? Why would I want to take something that's not mine? And take your big bloated ass to Africa. You couldn't be that size there. I'm not calling names. A nigga tried to tell me, well, why would you want to take someone's land? We're always fighting for somebody else's cause. So all of these things to hold them up, right? Other leaders saw more hope, but always disagreement over the practicality of the proposed undemocratic consolidation gave way to fury that some Yankees called the proposal and the proposing slaveocracy barbaric. Their feelings got hurt the same way that they're putting monuments up to the Confederacy. They can't face that you're traitors, you're racists, you're monsters, you're barbarians. They can't handle that. So what became a Southerners' calculated, if arguably futile, strategy to protect the hinterlands always turned into a touchy civilization's enraged spree of self-justification, like it's called the Confederacy Just Cause, like when they massacred black folks at Fort Pillow and Saltville and Lusty and other places where they massacred black folks, Jenkins, Elkins Bend, wherever the hell it was. Okay, look it up. Then few black belt Southerners dared turn away from the border's call to colors. The deserter would be labeled a traitor during the next election, next election campaign, and their competition to prove their professions of loyalty to slavery were true blue. Both Southern Democrats and Southern Whigs demanded that Northern parties ally support for border fortifications. Northern Whigs, with their party base in the North, always labeled such demands as undemocratic blackmail. In contrast, most Northern Democrats, with their party base in the South, usually appeased the slaveholders. The Northern Democratic Party's pro-slavery laws protecting slavery in the Union kept restless disunionists at bay in the South. The Democracy's pro-slavery laws also weakened Southern Whigs. Southern Democrats derided their partisan foes as traitors to slavery, allied with Yankee defamers who rejected the national protections of slavery. After Democracy's mid-century pro-slavery laws, the first Lower South Whigs, then the Upper South Whigs, could no longer risk their political vulnerability. The Whigs were finished as of one of the two great national parties. So there used to be a Whig party, which is sort of what the Republicans became. It got destroyed by them not hating black people enough. Okay? Hatred of black people is the core of much of what America is. Grow up. The surviving Democratic Party faced severe Northern trouble. Yankee appeasers of the slaveocracy had been willing to protect slavery in order to save the Union and the party, but the minority's demand for protection increasingly endangered the majoritarian Union. The majority acquiesced in minority demands, prevented white men from debating in Congress, then forced white men to return alleged fugitive slaves to slavery without the protection of jury trials, and then led to the anti-Republican government in Kansas. So the South's prime appeasers, the Northern Democrats, faced the murderous political charges that they had helped white Southerners enslave white Northerners. Get that. White folks are losing their rights, trying to shore up white folk fucking us. Thus did the issue of republicanism swerve for liberty for blacks, where Yankee abolitionists successfully awakened only so many whites to a colorblind consciousness, to liberty for whites, where no Yankee racist needed a raised conscience. With Yankees ever more determined to save white republicanism by containing slave power aggressiveness, ever more Southerners looked more favorably at disunion. In other words, if we can't do whatever the hell we want with niggas and you won't help us, then we're out of here, deuces, right? It keeps coming back to us. Here again, American republicanism lent the slaveholders extra potency and extra trouble. The Declaration of Independence's basis of people's right to withdraw their consent to be governed seemed to make secession theoretically legitimate, but another of republicanism's foundations that the losers must obey ballot box winners ill-supported a minority's attempt to withdraw consent from electoral verdict. Translation: we'll let you treat black folk in your kind of way. You can even split. But when we have an election, we're supposed to acknowledge the winner. And they say, well, we're white. We don't even acknowledge another white winner. We just want our fucking way. We just destroy shit. This is the kind of childish shit you see from people on both sides. Whether it's around trans, whether it's around just these people are crazy. Now, so I'm going to decide if someone wins, they didn't win because I said so. I'm white and I own slaves and I said so. I'm white and I don't own slaves. I said so too. Well, if you don't want me to leave, then and then again, I need to remind everyone 70% or more of the U.S. economy was wrapped up in cotton. They were a minority politically, but they were working with a whole lot of money. In 1860, there were two places where there were lots of millionaires in this country. The city of New York and the state of Mississippi. Be very clear about that. The richest people in America outside of New York were in Mississippi. That's how much money they were making off of black folks. Okay, so don't ever let anyone tell you, oh, well, it was political, it was states' right. No, this money being made off of black people's blood, sweat, and tears, and land, since we're part Indian too, right? And significantly, some of us are completely Indian. Not all. I'm not all. And I don't give a damn. Deborah kissed my ass. There are some African people in my family. I can't stand this excessive thing of picking and choosing shit. I got folk from all over. But I'm here, so I'm indigenous to here, and so are you if you're not tethers. If the lower South states opted for disunion, especially after the slaveholders lost the national election, middle and border South states would have to decide between protecting the elected majority's right to rule and protecting the departing minority's right to withdraw consent. Their decision would be critical, for as in Congress, Southern unity would be mandatory. If a third or more of the South stayed with the North, the disunionist chances in a civil war would plummet. They always had a thought to go into war. White folk love their guns, love fighting and killing. That's who these people are. Sorry, that's your history. So whether in or out of the Union, the southern core and tropical climes remain dependent on the southern periphery and northern climes. The southern border folk continue to insist on protecting slavery only in the Union and not in a seceded southern republic. So at a certain point, certain people says, look, beat blacks, lynch blacks, work them, rape them, but stay a part of America. Come on, white brother, why are y'all trying to split? We got a good thing here. People kiss your ass. What do you want? But could slavery, particularly at the South's exposed edges, be forever protected inside the national government? The question pressed harder after the Kansas-Nebraska Act, when many more Northern Democrats disavowed any further slave power demand for protection. Not protection, they wanted special rights. They talk about black folks getting stuff as special. The white supremacists have always gotten more than their share of rights, more consideration around their hatred and exploitation of black people than anyone, except for billionaires that you've got now. When black folks ask for remedy, you're told that's a special right. Well, it was a special right to keep us chattelized and discriminated against and lynched and all the other things, right? So they're saying, stay. We'll help you, but don't leave. Don't bust up the country. We got a good thing here. And at this very moment, when the slaveholders' national leverage narrowed, a changing southern economy widened, and the slaveocracy's internal divisions especially augmented the split between the border and lower Souths. Here's a chapter I've been waiting to get to. Y'all want me to keep going? Because I'm enjoying this. This is good to me. This is chapter 2, Economic Bonanza, 1850 to 1860, and this chapter is very short. Since revolutionaries must risk life, fortune, and honor, only a plight perceived to be horrendous inspires the gamble. The perceived pre-revolutionary horror may take many forms, threat to one's life, one's family, one's reputation, one's psyche, one's religion, one's sacred rights. But economic travail provides the most common goad to revolution. It's about money, baby. In only one respect, albeit a crucial one, did economic crisis cause a disunion revolution. Those exceptions to everything, normally Southern, South Carolina's exceptional secessionist aristocrats often faced exceptional economic affliction in the 1850s. Southerners everywhere else usually enjoyed a decade of economic boom. Let me repeat this in a different way. South Carolina, where as much as 40-50% of all the people shipped into America as slaves came through Charleston, South Carolina. South Carolina, the queen slave state of the South, some of the richest, most established folks in terms of dogging out black people getting paid, they had a little depression. Their money wasn't good. That slave dollar wasn't getting them as much as it did in the 1840s. So typically they had been the resistant ones to going to the extreme, but when your money gets funny, in the words of Cindy Lauper, money changes everything. So South Carolina was hurting. Fort Sumter is in South Carolina. Alexander Hamilton Stevens, I suspect gay Confederate leader in South Carolina, because he never married, owned about 50 black people. That's suspicious to me. And he looked like Lily Tomlin and shit. I'm just saying. Yet prosperity had its unsettling aspect. Better economic times helped worsen Southern social divisions, thereby threatening King Cotton's suddenly well-heeled army of fanciers. Like most capitalists, slaveholders tended to do better or worse depending on the era, the locale, and the enterprise. Because they exported staple crops, their fortunes fluctuated according to national and world economic conditions. Two American banking panics, first in 1819 and then in 1837, each ushered in more than a decade of dismal markets for Southern agricultural producers. For a few years in the mid-1830s, Southern farmers enjoyed better prices. Otherwise, agrarian life after 1820 featured exhausting struggles with poor markets, lashing storms, and pressing bankers. A lot of those banks up north in New York and Philadelphia. Philadelphia was the financial capital of America before Wall Street. I'm just trying to tell y'all. Battles began in the tobacco exporting Upper South, and especially in Virginia. 18th century Virginia tobacco planters ranked among the wealthiest Americans. Then, late in the century, Virginia's dynasty leaders' economic power shrank while their political power swelled. The George Washingtons, James Madisons, Thomas Jeffersons, and James Monroes watched the prices for their tobaccos shrink thanks to worldwide overproduction. They worked those black folks hard. Their tobacco yields also sank thanks to depleted soil. In response, many Virginians moved west to virgin soil beyond their declining commonwealth. As for stalwarts who loyally remained debilitated in Virginia, they had to retrench, diversify crops, fertilize soil, and sell some slaves. A limping economic endurance ensued. More financial problems haunted the coastal South Carolina, 18th century domain of aristocrats even richer than the Virginians. Off the South Carolina coast, gentlemen slaves usually planted Sea Island cotton. That luxurious fiber while normally commanding lucrative returns, periodically suffered from erratic prices and savage hurricanes. Storms and occasionally decimated the main business on South Carolina's coastal mainland, rice production. The unsteady weather helps explain why rice planters who until the 1850s enjoyed tolerably steady prices and yields had been economically stressed since the Panic of 1819. Had all that black help and still struggling. God help them. Poor managerial practices compounded rice planters' economic difficulties. So it's not the black people's fault. White folks in charge ran shit in the ground. Since South Carolina's coastal swamps spawned malarial mosquitoes, rich men often fled the area in April to October growing season. Absentees seldom efficiently manage intricate rice operations. Inefficient plantations seldom sufficiently finance 6-month vacations. So they are out whoring and gambling and shit instead of put money into their workforce and their plant. And black businesses fail, never could get cash and credit. They got cash and credit and their shit still failed. Just think about how people talk about us. South Carolina planters of the coarser, short staple cotton, situated above the cyclic coastal swamps on the rolling hills of the Piedmont, had long been better managers, yet more imperiled entrepreneurs. South Carolina's healthy upcountry habitat yielded less planter absenteeism and therefore more intensive slaveholder direction than did the state's dank low country. But upcountry producers of crude cotton compared to low country producers of rice and Sea Island cotton suffered from the worst prices and yields during the periods from 1820 to 1850. Upcountry South Carolina, America's first short staple cotton kingdom, also had been the first to exhaust the soil. In the 1820s and early 1830s, then again in the late 1830s and 1840s, when poor cotton prices compounded poor yields. South Carolinians by the tens of thousands deserted their state. South Carolina, home of the South's densest concentration of blacks and thickest concentration of disunionist revolutionaries, thus became the only lower South state to lose population. Deserters from South Carolina often brought disunion aspirations to that great land of hustle, the lush river valleys of Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, and Arkansas. In virgin Southwest, but not aging South Carolina, booming yields compensated for lagging prices. Thus, a cotton planters' contest against the elements had usually seemed narrowly winnable. During the terrible depression of the early 1840s, however, the entire cotton kingdom seemed in peril. In that dismal period, difficulties also afflicted producers of the South's subsidiary exports, including hemp, like the kind you smoke, in Mississippi, and there are also hemp in Kentucky. In fact, in many places it's called nigger hemp, so you know who was cutting it. Including hemp growers in Missouri, sugar planters in Louisiana, tobacco farmers in Virginia. Smaller farmers suffered fewer anxieties. Slaveless yeoman farmers, when living in the cotton belt, sometimes grew and sold a few bales. More often, they exclusively cultivated food for their families beyond the plantation regions, particularly in the mountain habitats, fluctuating world markets, even less afflicted self-sufficient yeomen. So broke-ass white people that would die for slavery, they had no skin in the game, but you're white, so you're going to take a mini ball for them anyway. Damn. Fear of the plantation South's market vulnerability climaxed in 1844 when Mississippi's U.S. Senator Robert J. Walker urged that Texas be annexed to the United States. Virgin Texas acres, Walker argued, would give hard-pressed planters a safety valve for superfluous, that's another word for needless or useless or duplicated blacks. Again, a safety valve, someplace to put all those niggas. Without Texas's safety valve, Walker gloomed, multiplying and starving black barbarians would inundate the South. Hallelujah, Jesus. Southern entrepreneurs brought into Walker's dismal vision. With that shuddered racial and economic claustrophobia, rich and poor brought to climax that 30 years of struggle, struggle, struggle. Then at mid-century, struggle largely vanished. Cotton prices, sugar prices, tobacco prices shot up, despite extravagant increases in crop production. The big southern cash crop, short staple cotton, which had sold for some $74 million a year in the 1840s, sold for $169 million yearly in the 1850s. In the 4 years before the Civil War, the crop nearly averaged some $207 million in value, almost 3 times more than the average figure a decade earlier. Talk about a boom. So too in the 1850s as compared to the 1840s, the Sea Island cotton crop increased 200% in value, sugar crop 150%, and the tobacco crop 67%. In comfortable contrast, the southern cost of living during the 1850s eased up by less than 33%. Only those politically crucial gentlemen, South Carolina's rice planters, still suffered under dreary economic skies. These squires' debts had multiplied faster than their assets, even in the 1820s, when rice yields and prices remained more immune than cotton figures in the worldwide economic downturn. In the 1850s, rice planters' immunity from market caprices and soil exhaustion ended, while their absentee mismanagement continued. Rice prices increased 6% during the 1850s, not beginning the offset of the 24% decline in rice produced. The average yearly worth of the crop died from $2.5 million in the 1840s to $1.9 million in the 1850s. And the year of secession, the value of these incensed gentlemen's exports plunged to $1.4 million, an all-time low. Let me just say to you, slavery is involved in this too. Okay? They start talking about this, 1819, whatever. Slavery ended in the British colonies that bought a lot of this rice, and slavery ended in Latin America and other places where people were selling this rice. This is part of it, meaning that they were producing commodities to sell to other people whose entire black population is producing rice, coffee, and other things. Once these people were no longer enslaved, they could grow their own damn rice or whatever else they wanted. Just so you'll know that, okay? They make it seem like, so, I mean, even that was involved in, they're selling stuff, they're selling rice as a staple to enslave people all over the world. Okay? The Low Country's careful entrepreneurs could still profit with rice production, but care became all the more necessary. While economic disaster honed a new edge on many South Carolina coastal squires' desire for disunion, entrepreneurs elsewhere sought a fortune rather than a revolution. Southerners developed almost 30 million previously untouched acres during the 1850s, increasing the land under cultivation over a third. Southern farmland doubled in value during the decade. Southern railroad lines more than tripled in length, built by black slaves. I'm adding that. Southern industrial receipts swelled by 66%. Again, black labor. Compared to the North, the South remained poorly developed industrially and ill-connected by railroads. But by the late 1850s, the rate of new development in Dixie surpassed Yankee standards. In one area, the South set records that the Yankees scorned. The price of slaves. See, they're working for the railroad. They're working in the Tredegar Iron Works in Richmond. black skilled workers, as much as they'll tell you they're stupid, they're inferior, right? Brick masons, all this ironwork, the grills you see in New Orleans and Charleston. The price of slaves took off in the 1850s. Who cleared those 30 million acres of land? Blacks did it. It's a lot of land. The average price for a lower South slave, after hovering at around $925 in 1830 to 1850, averaged $1,240 in 1851 to 1855 and $1,658 in 1856 to 1860, a 79% rise in the South's largest capital investment. Let me just say this to you. In 1860, over 50% or more of the total value that Southerners owned was black people, was their main source of capital. They've never forgiven us for them not owning us outright as slaves. And I want to say to you, these slaves are skilled slaves. If you get into concubinage, where people are buying light-skinned women to screw, you're talking about as much as $20,000 for a quadroon. And they were selling kids and all of that, even kids. People had slaves. So, these people are nasty, what they've done, and they think they're going to get away with it. And they probably will, because we have so many weak, coon-ass black people that stand for nothing. I'm not optimistic about things getting better, not based on them, but what we won't do for self. After the national panic of 1857, when the North fell into a prolonged depression and the South quickly recovered, the Southerners gloated about getting richer and quicker than money-mad Yankees. That fresh swaggering exemplified a new tone in the newest South. Vanished from the lower South, except from the aging South Carolina, where gloomings about the stagnating profits, superfluous slaves, economy trapped without a safety valve, omnipresent with visions of new beginnings, of expanding slave empires, even in some quarters of importing fresh Africans. What at a time this was, and the land where cotton became almost overnight a very wealthy king. But the true American monarch remained king numbers, with the sovereign's potential dominion over King Cotton. Since the North possessed more citizens than the South, and the South more slaveholders than slaveholders needed a double minority dominion over sectional and national majorities, unless Southern non-slaveholders cared more about preserving slavery and or defying the Yankees than about anything else, and other priorities to the Union, to peace, to prosperity, could bend the poor folks' allegiance. The non-slaveholders' non-zeal could yield congressional compromises on slavery or Civil War collaboration with Yankee armies. Unfortunately for the slaveocracy's southerly core areas, the better economic times of the 1850s nudged the northernly peripheral areas towards becoming more culturally Yankee. One fact was paramount. Slaves grew dramatically more expensive, almost twice as expensive in 1860 as in 1850. One result was omnipresent. Slaveless farmers. These are the broke-ass redneck people, the kind that are on fentanyl and crazy checks. Their predecessors could not often afford the $1,600 slaves, while big planters could profitably pay the price. One of the consequences was troublesome. The relative proportion of slaveholders to non-slaveholders shrank fastest in slaveholders' least committed spot, the border South. In the whole South during the pre-secession decade, slaveholding families shrank from 43% to 37% of all Southern white families. Meanwhile, the number of white families owning 20 or more slaves boomed 6 times faster than the number owning 1 to 4 slaves. While large slaveholders' holdings grew faster, white belt areas grew whiter. Slaves generated profits faster in the lower South tropical cotton and sugar kingdoms than in the upper South tobacco and grain farms. Fugitive slaves also escaped easiest from the border states where slave labor generated the smallest profits. So during the 1850s, border South masters sold some 53,000 slaves, and Middle South masters sold some 84,000 slaves to lower South capitalists. As blacks drained out of the northern South, white immigrants from foreign nations poured in. Between 1850 and 1860, the border South attracted 142 foreign immigrants, almost 3 times more laborers than the blacks it lost. Meanwhile, the Middle South gained some 31,000 immigrants, over 1/3 of the blacks it lost. The resulting percentage of slave-holding white families dropped in the Middle South from 30% to 25%, and then plunged in the border South from 23% to 16%. If the non-slaveholder percentages continued to plummet at those rates, the most northern southern state within a decade or two would have the same relatively paltry number of slaves, circa 5%, as the colonial North had in 1776, when the area had begun its 50-year creep towards abolishing slavery. In one key way, the 1860 border South was already too Yankee. By 1860, the border South contained 419,000 immigrants and free blacks, compared to barely more slaves, some 429,000. In 1860, Maryland contained almost as many foreign immigrants, some 77,000, as it contained free blacks, some 84,000, or slaves, 87,000. In 1860, Missouri contained 40% more foreign immigrants than slaves. The lower South, in contrast, contained almost 14 times more slaves than foreign immigrants. As the border South slowly became less dependent on slave labor and more dependent on immigrant and free black workers, the lower South became blacker, more enslaved society, and a culture where higher slave prices made slaveless white yeomen and tenants increasingly less likely to become slaveholders. They couldn't keep up with the slaveholding Joneses people. While the economic boom drained more slaves from the most northern and the most southern South, South Carolina lost its people at a more alarming pace than ever. Some 7,000 whites and some 70,000 slaves trooped from South Carolina to the virgin Southwest during the 1850s. The hemorrhage somewhat afflicted upcountry South Carolina cotton planters. These squires bettered times, while relief from previous awful times could not match the booming times on the lower South frontier. But the stagnating coastal rice fields pressed more people out of the debilitated South Carolina. Charleston, Mecca of the rice gentry, lost 1/3 of its slaves, with foreign immigrants replacing enslaved laborers. Charleston, to the alarm of its crusty aristocracy, was becoming, of all things, like a Yankee free labor city. Here, as usual, Charlestonians took Southern apprehensions to an abnormal extreme. But whether in Charleston, Mobile, or New Orleans, Southern cities displayed a new normality. Cheap immigrant wage earners replacing expensive black slaves. So, too, not only the contracting South Carolina Low Country, but also the prosperous Upper South tobacco kingdoms extensively dispatched slaves to southwestern cotton and sugar fields. The Southwest, that most prosperous Southland, grew ever more confident, ever more black with slaves, and ever more alienated from the increasingly Yankee-like Northern South and the increasingly afflicted Charleston environs. Such differential prosperity somewhat aided the Disunionists. The lower South area, most falling behind South Carolina, had the classic economic desperation to start a revolution. The lower South, the area most marching ahead, The lush Southwest had classic economic confidence to consider war winnable if South Carolina could start one. How, after all, could the North whip the South in the Civil War when Southerners had routed Northerners at the Yankees' own game, getting rich quick? Meanwhile, the declining South Carolinians and the ascending Southwesterners, together the core of the plantation South, harbored a cultural center's classic concern about its periphery. The border South, while still containing 400,000 slaves and very few abolitionists, was drifting towards becoming a periphery of the North. Why not strike for a southern nation when the border South periphery might still go along, and before South Carolinians lost the nerve to do any striking at all? In part because the National Democratic Party still existed and might still protect slaveocracy and the Union. Moreover, in the midst of their newly discovered prosperity, most Southerners, whether inside or outside of democracy, preferred to get rich inside the Union. The evermore Yankee border South demonstrated a special loathing for disunion. How could all of these increasingly different folk be rallied behind a dangerous revolution? How could slaveholders forge a single world when their great weapon of social control over blacks, coercive terror, could not generate universal white conformity? Lower South planters did lynch some dissenters in their neighborhoods, but the southern core areas could not invade their peripheral areas to lynch uncommitted or heretical border South citizens. So forging a single white Southern culture had to begin the democratic way, with fashioning an ideology and building a consensus. All Southerners had to consider slavery a blessing, and the dearer more than any other blessing. But what pro-slavery idea could unify the South's ideological superstructure with the civilization's material substructure more divided than ever? How y'all like this? Because this is good. This is so good. Oh my God! All of this, and then there's so many different chapters. What should I do? I can still do this one. I'm trying to think. Y'all want me to do some more? I've been doing this 2 hours. I can always do more. And there's so many good. I feel like doing Caribbean Delusions and re-enslaving the free blacks. And can I go off script for a second? Because, oh damn, this is good. I can stay at this. What time is this? 11 something. Stephen. Let me see. I'm going to go ahead with this. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to stick with this for a second. Y'all like this? I can't see this. How many up there? Okay. How many of y'all have retweeted this? Because I'm enjoying this. I got 70 over here. And let me do my commercial. If you like my Angry Black Men's Book Club, y'all know that Cash App screwed me. So they took out my Cash App. So if y'all like this and y'all want to do something, you can always be a Patreon supporter. My Patreon is Dr. wrandyshort. And that is also my Venmo. And of course, everybody knows that my Zelle and PayPal, I'm going to put this up here. Please circulate Sister Star. Put that up there because I need to stay in this. I want to read this whole damn book. I have listened to it 3 times on Audible, and this is damn. This dude put this shit down. He's breaking down white folk Yes, and I've got Give Send Go, so you don't have to add an app to load up your phone. You got a lot of naked pictures or something in there. So definitely, you can donate. My PayPal is wrandyshort@gmail.com. My Zelle is wrandyshort@gmail.com. My Give Send Go is givesendgo.com/GAMGG. Absolutely, drop me a dime. And also, you can always email me. My email, I respond as well. There's Venmo and there's Patreon. I would love to get more Patreon, and I don't even lock my shit up. And if you guys missed that, a great conversation with Jaguar, right? That is the Jaguar, right? And no, we didn't talk about Diddy. I'm not really interested in Diddy. I've never been. One time I didn't like when I met him. I'm not interested. I felt he was a gorilla since then. I feel it now. So if you notice, if you're looking for us to talk about Diddy, maybe if he walks or if he gets a sentence, we'll talk about it then. We have a lot of other shit we want to talk about. Okay, so, but I'm not. I could care less about some of that. I really am turned off. Okay, so if y'all looking, that's people being nasty like that is really, really unpleasant to me. I joke about it, but I get upset because that shit's close in. If you've had bullshit in your family, you know what I'm saying. I'm in part 2 of this book. How many parts of this is this? There are 8 parts. And these are really nice chapters. Okay. Let me go to, I'm in part 2. Part 2 is the climatic ideological frustrations. So if you guys y'all want me to keep reading, I think I could do this for at least another hour or so. So let me just go ahead and start on this. Part 2, climatic ideological frustrations. According to the pivotal conventional historical wisdom, one generation after Thomas Jefferson and other Southern founding fathers called slavery a necessary evil and only necessary until blacks could be removed from the United States. Pro-slavery writers convinced all Southerners that slavery was a positive good and should never be removed. The Virginia legislature's 2-week debate in 1832 allegedly marked the last Southern consideration of anti-slavery. 1832 is after, Nat Turner did his thing. Okay, people say, turn the other cheek and shit. Sometimes some people only understand, doing something to them. Sort of like the people that got their asses beat in Cincinnati. I don't encourage people to go out and swing on someone, but you can't go and pop people in their face. Not these days. Not a grown-ass black man and think somebody's not going to want to kick your ass back. Folk are living back in this period I'm reading this damn book. I'm dead ass serious. If you're a racist watching this, a lot of folks have guns these days. They don't mind shooting your ass, going to hell with blazes. It's not just stupid ass young boys that can't get pussy in school that don't mind dying. Just saying. Okay, I said it. Now, so look at that. A necessary evil to one group of people, and then it's a positive good for other people. See how they lie? Okay, 1832, that's after Nat Turner them were out there slashing people. Of course, they killed all kinds of people down in Southside Virginia. But it did shake people up that, maybe black people will treat us the way we treat them. Oh, shit. Maybe we should let them free send their asses back to Africa. That would have probably been the first thing we got was a free trip. Anyway. Thereafter, nothing was supposedly left to discuss, for everyone celebrated slavery's glory. This misconception errs in every essential. The necessary evil argument remained widely believed in the Upper South. The dream of eventually removing blacks, thus making the evil unnecessary, continued to thrive, including in the most advanced Upper South pro-slavery polemics. Important Upper South legislature discussions of slavery came after Virginia 1832 debate, The most sophisticated lower South intellectuals never completely mastered the pro-slavery puzzle. The ideological shortfall made the political solutions to Southern division seem all the more necessary. The frustrating problem, ideologically no less than politically, was to reconcile unlimited slaveholder power with limited Republican power. Attempts at ideological reconciliation took three colliding forms based on class, race, and religion. Each received preliminary elaboration in the 1830s, all gained more polish in the 1850s. None swept all the minds and hearts before the Civil War. Some Southerners still emerged with fresh excitement about the better understood mission. Others gloomed about persistently intractable problems. Others hoped that slavery could be improved and then might wither away. In their climatic anti-slavery arguments, late antebellum Southerners still disagreed about why and whether the institution was a blessing and whether slavery could be reformed and or eventually ended. Chapter 3. James Henry Hammond and the unsolvable pro-slavery puzzle. After William Lloyd Garrison inaugurated his Liberator in 1831, slaveholders desired a better defense than the necessity of an evil. I just want to say to you, these folks always change the goalpost. Once you change and put them, you catch them, they change their tactic, okay? It was CRT. First it was Black Lives Matter, then it's CRT, now it's DEI, now it's black fatigue. It's always a change. Whenever you bust them, they change to something else. It's the same damn thing. It's never changed, okay? By the mid-1840s, new arguments for slavery's glory dodged the Republican case for slavery's shame, that masters possess absolute power and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This first wave of pro-slavery writers severed the paternalistic absolute power to uplift inferiors inside private homes from a republic's restricted power to regulate equals outside private gates. Some 1830 to 1845 polemicists claim that by cleaving unlimited household rule from limited government rule, they had converted every Southern Republican into domestic absolutism. South Carolina's James Henry Hammond proclaimed the victory especially grandiosely. Yet Hamilton demonstrated in his published theory and his domestic life that the pre-1845 pro-slavery writers had not reconciled Republican and absolute power, whether inside or outside the home. The clash between anti-slavery Northerners and pro-slavery Southerners often centered on domestic hurts. Southerners called slavery the domestic institution, slave labor under caring paternalist inside domestic sanctuaries. They affirmed beat free labor exploitation under uncaring employers beyond the home. Your homes, retorted Yankees, are bespattered brothels, not caring sanctuaries. You fornicate with your slaves and further dirty, unchristian households. Yankees wielded sexual slurs so self-righteously, so scornfully, and so pornographically that they could sound like an anti-Catholic voyeurs spinning tales of the righteous priests abed with virginal nuns. The Slave States, intoned George Bourne in an 1837 pamphlet published in Boston, are one vast brothel featuring incest, polygamy, adultery, and other uncleanness. He means sodomy. When supposedly Christian masters force his slave, she dare not complain. To illustrate the sufferer, Bourne told of a nearly white slave, her master's son compelled her whenever he pleased to share his bed. The servile could not appeal to her master for protection, for he was guilty of like practices. This pious victim of brutal lust of dissolute young man had no prospect before her except being again and again polluted whenever his unbridled passion should dictate. Southerners called this charge irrelevant sensationalism. They never got any pussy from slaves. Okay, let me stop. How many Southern Christians, after all, degenerated into sexual monsters? Quantities of this grotesqueness answered abolitionists are irrelevant. A few masters' sexual selfishness illustrated all masters' license to be brutes. In addition to sexually exploiting slaves, owners tore black families apart, prevented slaves from reading the Bible, and brutally lashed their serviles. A Christian republic must check and balance fallen man's power to devastate natural rights in home, no less than in government. Englishmen, no less than the New Englanders, pressed this plea in 1845. James Henry Hammond, the recently governor of South Carolina, answered the grand old man of the English anti-slavery movement, Thomas Clarkson. The South Carolinian swiftly published letters to Clarkson summarized the first wave of pro-slavery writing. Hammond denied that slaveholders alone possessed absolute power. Unrestrained employers could fire or underpay powerless employees. Undernourished and sued during free labor society's boom times and unemployment in bad times. In all times, poor folks' illicit sexual intercourse prevailed from an early period in life. If England's Thomas Clarkson wished to protect impoverished laborers and hapless females, he should elevate his society's so-called free laborers and the conditions of our slaves. To the condition of our slaves. He would then accomplish the most glorious act of emancipation. Slavery emancipated free laborers from devastation, explained Hammond, because owners love their things as fondly as they love themselves. Thus, the self-interested patriarch selflessly fed and protected his purchased people. The selfish slaveholder also ensured Republican stability. In non-slaveholding republics, demagogues rallied ignorant and poor free laborers to seize employers' property. In the free North, fearful crisis of Republican institutions will explode at no remote period. Slaveholder republicanism prevented such explosions because slaves, the poorest and most ignorant, half the population, could not vote. Slavery provided the foundation of every well-designed, durable republic. Hammond here dared a political minefield. The colorblind case for enslaving all lower cases repelled the very classes of slaveholding minority needed to rally. The Southern white non-slaveholding majority. So Hammond, like almost all Southern pro-slavery writers, aborted the colorblind argument before he had half developed it. After he swerved in the conventional fashion from slavery to all laborers to bondage for exclusively black laborers, he reiterated that vulnerable inferiors needed disinterested protectors. But he now declared that race, not class, doomed inferiors to haplessness. Without white masters' paternalistic protection, Hammond warned, biologically inferior blacks, loving to sleep above all, and sensual excitements of all kinds when awake, would snooze, then wander, then plunder, then murder, and then be exterminated or re-enslaved. This argument for exclusively black slavery better suited whites' taste, but Hammond's racist appeal belied Southern facts. Some planters trusted black drivers more than white overseers to supervise their plantations. Many border South masters manumitted trusted black slaves, especially in Delaware and Maryland. These Southerners needed scientific evidence that seemingly superior blacks were really inferior. Hammond offered biblical instead of biological proof. In the Old Testament, he argued, Hebrews often practiced slavery. In the New Testament, Christ never denounced servitude. The argument invited the retort that Christ loathed the selfish spirit. Abolitionists stressing the spirit of Christianity denied the slaveholders' selfishness, guaranteed selflessness. Rather, self-interest impelled masters to sell slaves, to deny blacks the Bible, to lash them into hard labor, and to despoil them sexually. Enslavers, concluded abolitionists, not employers, exemplified selfish individualists. and the antithesis of selfish Christ. The charge that the abolitionist brothel terminology laid bare the Republican and Christian essence of the matter did master self-interest sufficiently check and balance their unlimited power to be brutes. Hammond answered that the abolitionists' absolute liberty to be Jabinical. That's for the Jacobins. Oh wow, I've never seen that used that way. Jacobinical. Not slaveholders' absolute power, and that's revolutionary. The Jacobites who killed the kings and folks in the French Revolution, okay? Jacobins. Not the slaveholders' absolute power to be abominable caused any Southern brutality. Hammond regretted that the slave is not allowed to read his Bible, but the sin rests upon the abolitionists because their unchecked agitation, slaves would read the scripture not as a book of hope and of love and of peace, but of despair, hatred, and blood. This is what these dummies have black folks on. Reading and believing in the same God their great-grandparents and other people had will make them weak, and the white supremacists, oh no, they read that book, we're going to have problems. I did this book, Advice Among Masters. Christian conversion did not make people good slaves. It made them difficult slaves. It's a lie. It's a lie a bunch of black Luciferian cultists put out there. You're liars, and you guys, all your cults and shit y'all make the churches look good, and I wouldn't even be bothered with half the churches out there. Y'all need to shut the fuck up with your lies. Y'all gonna burn in hell. And by the way, none of these Luciferian folks take a stand against abortion, LGBTQ, and they're not really leading on reparations. These people stand for nothing. They just want to be whores and druggies and talk about Pan-Africanism. They're scum, every single one of them. Get off my platform. I don't like you. Yep, and the Bible's cool. You don't think so because you've never read it, or you're the kind of wicked person that talks about this going to hell. Since anti-slavery fanatics aim at loosening all ties between master and slave, continued Hammond, we must somewhat abandon our efforts to attach them to us and control them through their affections and pride. We have to rely more and more on the power of fear. While frightful discipline is painful to us, we should be ineffably stupid to allow our domestic servants to read your writings and cut our throats. Mind you, he's talking about reading the damn Bible and other stuff. Hammond answered abolitionists' distressing charge unchecked sexual exploitation with another castigation of Yankees' unlicensed liberty. Anti-slavery perverts regretted Hammond had absolute freedom to publish pornographic fantasies. Sexually frustrated Yankees imagined that licentiousness necessarily arises from slavery, but such irregularities as in interracial sex and the resulting mulattoes occur here for the most part in the cities. Urban non-slaveholders or natives of the North or foreigners were the chief offenders, as decided proof of master's continence. Hammond called the proportion of mulattoes infinitely small and out of the towns next to nothing. Hammond inquired while female abolitionists, learned old maids, all would linger with such an insatiable relish on planters next to no scandalous stories. Only one explanation could occur to even the most charitable mind. Ladies of eminent virtue, by their delight to dwell on the ridiculous false charges, reveal that rage without which betrays the fires within. So too Yankee clergymen, by condemning plantations as brothels, compound for sins they're inclined to by damning those that have no mind to. He's saying that the white women abolitionists wanted to screw the black male slaves, and he's saying the white preachers that preach against abolition want to screw black women. This savage tone contrasts with Hammond's serene conclusion. The South Carolinian thanked the abolitionists for Southerners' perfect ease of conscience. Before abolition agitation, many Southerners saw a duty to get rid of slavery, but external attacks compelled internal reconsideration. Southerners emerged with the universal conviction that holding slaves, we violate no law of God, inflict no injustice on any of his creatures. In the year 1845, exalted James Henry Hamilton, conversion to pro-slavery had been totally accomplished, and the slave South had become a monolith perfected. So limited an argument could hardly score so unlimited a triumph. By deviating to slavery for only blacks, Hammond had surrendered his colorblind case for enslaving all laborers. By never demonstrating blacks' inferiority, the South Carolinian built no foundation for racist slavery. By charging the abolitionists caused slaveholders unchristian brutality, Hammond conceded that Southern brutes existed. By sneering that only Yankee virgins and clergymen would dwell on the planters next to no sexual brutalizations, he created suspicion that gentlemen protested too much. Hammond's private papers confirmed the suspicion. Hammond the polemicist called all blacks inferior to all whites, but Hammond the planter called his black driver superior to his white overseer. Quote, I wish you to consult my driver on all occasions, he wrote his overseer, and in all matters of doubt, take his opinion, which you will generally find supported by good reason, close quote. Again, where Hamilton, the theorist, declared that selfishness impelled masters to uplift underlings benevolently, Hamilton, the practitioner, subjected his initial slaves to a year of severity, which cost me infinite pain to subdue them. While Hamilton's subsequent lashings decreased, his sexual exploitations accelerated. 6 years before writing letters to Clarkson, Hammond purchased an 18-year-old Sally Johnson and her 1-year-old daughter Louisa. The new owner enjoyed Sally and later Louisa as his bedmates. Hammond's son shared these enjoyments. Hammond's wife, upon discovering her husband had turned her home into a bordello, demanded that the absolutists end the outrage. Hammond refused. His wife then left the home for half a decade. Louisa and Sally bore Hammond and or his sons half-white children. Hammond kept his two mistresses and their children in a separate slave cabin without a black male resident. Hammond's deployment of absolute power precluded 2 black marriages and his smashed white family. This anti-domestic chapter in the history of the domestic institution told no tale of romantic love transcending class and racial barriers. My love, conceded Hammond, has been either lustful or purely platonic. No wife could be purer, more high-minded and devoted than this, but her purity could not satisfy his appetites. The slave women who satisfied Hammond's appetites could not regretted satisfy his taste. His most distasteful problems involved his half-white children. In an 1856 letter to his legitimate son Harry, Hammond declared that his, or were they Harry's, illegitimate children must not be freed. It would be cruelty to them. Nor would I like that any but my own blood should own as slaves my own blood. James Hamilton implored Harry not to allow any of the children, of possible children, to be slaves of strangers. Slavery in the family will be their happiest earthly condition. Despite his anti-familial sexual sprees, Hammond here sincerely extolled familial slavery. Even blacks who possessed half of his own genes, he thought, still needed a white paternalist protection because James Henry Hammond truly believed in the paternalist absolute power. He writhed the more when abolitionists pointed out its anti-paternal outrages. His apologetics, the most pro-slavery arguments, brewed pride and shame into a polemic saturated with hate. Perhaps Hammond spewed out especially hateful hypocrisy about abolitionists, clergymen, and virgins because his debauchery obliterated the central point about the slave South, that selfishness drove slaveholders to be selfless. Supposedly benevolent despots have always held that position. The absolutist allegedly possessed everything, allegedly can gain nothing by exploiting his subjects, but Hammond gained sexual pleasure by exploiting his slaves, even if he risked his good name and his good wife. He betrayed his highest interest by indulging his lowest appetites. No wonder Republicans denied that any absolutist will be selfless sexually. Hammond was an exceptionally selfish absolutist, but his very exceptionalness confirmed the abolitionist point. The licentious slaveholder was not the norm, just the most spectacular illustration that self-interest hardly guaranteed disinterestedness. And the very letter to his son that proved Hammond's uncommon sexual grotesqueness, he also exposed a more common slaveholder's selfishness. By pleading with his white son to retain the ownership of half-white slaves, he conceded that the economically pressed heirs often selfishly sold servants despite paternalism's selfless code. As another slaveholder lamented, nothing could prevent the possibility that favorite servant might be sold away from their spouses and children, even if a good owner inherited a slave family. The deceased could not answer for the heir's life and 1,000 accidents which befall property, nor could Hammond, even while living, altogether answer for his mulatto children's treatment. After his slave Louisa alleged that Hammond had sired her son Henderson, the master decided to keep Henderson in the family, but the Henderson's wild and daring spirit and propensity for petty theft disrupted Hammond's big house, so the patriarch dispatched his perhaps son from his not-so-happy South Carolina home. After being apprenticed to a Georgian, the unhappy Henderson unsuccessfully ran away in retaliation. Henderson supervised the strung-up Hammond's son by the feet, with the mulatto's shoulders barely touching the ground, his arms bound behind his back. Hammond thought, although distressed enough to investigate, dared not to intervene. What else could he do with a not-so-black boy who must not come home? His question raised another. Could every Southerner believe that the absolute power had been reconciled with domestic happiness and Christian republicanism? No way, as Hammond once again confessed in private in 1848 upon reading a Border South minister's supposed pro-slavery tract. The South Carolinian privately termed the authors utterly opposed to slavery. The Border South divine, Hammond pointed out, believed Southerners would abolish slavery the moment they could get rid of blacks. Worse, the author hoped that African colonization would rid America of blacks, and that being three-fourths abolitionists, in my estimation, the soft heart's view, are those of a Border South regions where he was reared. There, the march of events will ere long abolish the institution entirely. In 1847, some Charlestonians seeking to preclude borderland abolition asked Hamilton to help establish a pro-slavery newspaper. Hammond refused. He feared that a large proportion of slaveholders who in every emergency would unite with us against Yankee invasion would refuse to unite with us in sustaining an organ that supported slavery as a blessing to be preserved, when they are well known and regarded as an evil which they one day hope to get rid of. The consequences of an open and avowed division among the slaveholders on this vital point might be serious. And this was the man who only 2 years earlier had publicly pronounced Southerners universally converted to slavery's permanent blessings. The private rather than the public Hammond properly diagnosed the persisting variety of Southern opinions. Pro-slavery writers in the 1850s often admitted that letters to Clarkston to the contrary, most Southern conversions had occurred since 1845. Until the last few years, Virginia's George Fitzhugh concluded in 1856. Most apologists declared Negro slavery to be justifiable only because racially exceptional. Others, by far the greater number, called even Negro slavery wrong in principle and looked forward to the gradual emancipation. Only very recently had Southerners taken the stronger and bolder grounds. Fitzhugh's favorite, Virginia pro-slavery writer, George Frederick Holmes, agreed that only in recent years had an entire revulsion of feelings and judgment alleviated troubled consciences and speculative doubts. Yet pleas to relieve doubts persisted. In 1851, an admirer of Iverson Brooks, a prominent South Carolina pro-slavery minister, offered to subsidize the cleric's pamphlet written to combat Kentuckians' prayer for abolition. Brooks' admirer feared that Northern fanaticism might infect the consciences of weak-minded, good Christian people of the South upon the question of right. A year later, conscience-stricken Georgian wrote Reverend James Henley Thornwell, South Carolina's leading pro-slavery theologian, confessing a very difficult time forming a settled opinion on the correct principles. According to the unsettled Georgian, every man who consciously believes slavery to be wrong must use whatever influence he may possess against it. Furthermore, every man who consciously believes it to be right must defend and advocate it. Could Thornwell satisfy my mind? The most important Virginia pro-slavery cleric of the 1850s aspired to satisfy unsettled minds. In 1856, Reverend Dr. William A. Smith, president of Randolph-Macon College, published his classroom lectures on the philosophy and practice of slavery. Quote, "A secret suspicion of the morality of African slavery in the South," regretted Smith, "troubled many of our best citizens. Too many slaveholders harbored private but painful suspicion that something must be wrong with the principle of domestic slavery. That suspicion extended beyond the slaveholders. Smith's greatest difficulty," he privately wrote to the governor of Virginia in 1857, "was to get the ear of a white laborer, of whom 9/10 would abolish slavery tomorrow if they could vote slaves out of the state." George Sawyer, a Louisiana lawyer, published his Southern Institute's 1859, regretted that thousands of Southerners blindly acknowledged slavery as a great moral and political evil. Such consciousness of wrong gives a faint heart and craven resolve to the bravest soldier. The South could never achieve breathless frenzy and indomitable zeal until all of her sons understood the true character and spirit of our institutions. 14 years after James Hamilton's letter to Clarkson, a year before the South rose in rebellion, George Sawyer still faced enervating suspicions that unlimited power might be anti-Christian and anti-Republican. Three questions bedeviled every post-Hammond attempt to reconcile the Republican and absolute power. Did colorblind theorists dare argue that white lower classes should be enslaved? Could racist polemicists prove that all blacks inferiority to all whites? What could deter absolute masters from violating the spirit of Christianity? Answering these questions required transcending James Hamilton's effort and indeed transforming Southern society. Hamilton had retreated from his arguments that republics must enslave all laborers of all colors, but if braver theorists insisted on colorblind position, Southern white free laborers would have to be enslaved. Again, the retreating Hammond had stopped short of proving blacks' inferiority. But if racial theorists advanced the scientific proof of blacks' biological haplessness, 250,000 free blacks would have to be re-enslaved. Whether future pro-slavery writers sanctified a transformed domestic institution on a racial or colorblind basis, the spirit of Christianity might require limits on anti-Christian selfishness. Even if Christ had never decried absolute power, he surely would have denounced Hammond's sexual absolutism. Preachers would have to convince absolutists that the only selfish paternalism served their God, their families, and their interests. If religious persuasion failed, Southern legislators would have to ban the perversion to the Christian spirit. But limits on masters while rescuing the spirit of Christianity and of republicanism would abolish unlimited power. Once again, perfecting a Christian Republican's defense of absolute power would require the world defended to be transformed. In the wake of letters to Clarkson, the puzzle of absolute versus Republican power remained unsolved and disconcerting, either to put together or to leave it in pieces. Shall I continue? This dude screwing mama and the baby. Wonder why your grandson wants to run away. Oh wow, this is good. What y'all say? Y'all like this? Please retweet this. I'm going to take a short break. It'll be no more than 2 minutes. I'm going to come back to chapter 4. How are y'all? How y'all feeling? Oh, this book is crazy. I told y'all, hearing it on Audible is great. If you got Amazon Audible, please get it. We need a whole bunch of books available. Give me 1 second. I'll pick this up. Oh my God. Don't y'all like this? This slavery is funky. Racist. Oh my God. And we don't need reparations. And this is all in our heads. We just lazy people, don't want to do nothing, don't want to work, and these people just, oh, we've never done anything. We built the greatest country in the world and haven't been paid. We need our damn money. Okay, y'all, here we go again. I'm in chapter 4. I'm in chapter 4, and The Road to Disunion by William H. Freeland. This is chapter 4. Good, I got time. 3 imperfect solutions. In fact, let me see where my cup is. Listen. Where did I put that in? I hope I didn't knock it. Where did I put that? 1 second. Wonderful. In the 1850s, pro-slavery sophisticates base their arguments on three conceptions of human inferiority. Virginia's George Fitzhugh emphasized economic helplessness. In other words, black people weren't worth shit, and black people couldn't get anything done unless we were slaves to white people. Everything required us being enslaved. Okay? Now we're building, making them rich, and we can't make it. This is satanic. You're making them super rich, and you can't make it. And yet there were free blacks making it with all the unfair racist laws even then were succeeding, and yet they can't make it. In reality, it is they who can't make it without us. They can't make it without resources in Africa and everywhere else. They're the biggest parasites. They've always been. Let's call it what it is. So we're helpless. He sought a colorblind protection of all lower-class laborers, white or black. Oh my God, this is an awful one. Alabama's Dr. Josiah Nott. This is a fucking nut, this dude, Nott. Spelled N-O-T-T. Let me put this shit up here. This is a crazy-ass man. This is I mean, if you can get your hands on a book by Nott and Glidden, it's worth thousands of dollars to get an original. Where they talked about black people being inferior. I'm just putting his name up here. Josiah Nott. It's spelled N-O-T-T. Look him up. One of the greatest monsters. They talk about Dr. Sims that used to cut open black women. This guy's a monster in his own right. There's a book by Nott and Glidden. It's really horrible. I've only touched it once or twice. You can get a reprint, a facsimile copy from Amazon if you want. How y'all doing in Twitter? All right. Alabama's Josiah Nott stressed racial incapacity. Again, we can't do shit. Why are you hunting us down? Why are you paying money for us if we were worthless? This is satanic. And I just finished reading. The one thing that upset all these people, the one argument is the Bible, God, Jesus Christ. And the big trick with our stupid asses is they've got us thinking that there's no power in the damn book. There's nothing to it. Abolitionist argument Bible. Abolitionists talking about justice, freedom and all. And we run after, I mean, damn, if Islam was going to help our asses, it should have helped us the last 500-600 years. Should have ended slavery in Africa, which it still have. So please don't bring that up. I don't care more. So all y'all, just get the hell out of my face. Okay? He urged protective dominion over blacks, slave or free. South Carolina's Reverend James Henry Thornwell underlined Christian depravity. He craved evangelical cleansing of all sinners, masters, or slaves. Late antebellum Southerners thus enjoyed several soothing reconciliations of despotic government over inferiors and democratic government for equals. But all arguments fell frustratingly short of compelling a universal pro-slavery belief. So you had all of these people, I guess they were doing their version of, I guess, MAGA. They're doing their version of MAGA where you justify, like, this guy, I call him hog shit, the Secretary of Defense, who's a beast. And they just sit up and argue, and this is DEI, people who won medals. There's a guy that y'all should look up who never got a Medal of Honor, whose name was Bussy, and I'm sorry, it does sound like something in Atlanta. but a black man in the Korean War that may have killed 250 Koreans, men and 2 machine guns, never got a Medal of Honor. I bet you if you brought it up, they would tell you it's DEI, but that fucker's never been on the battlefield the same way. These people are sick. And the problem isn't that Cincinnati happened. The problem is it doesn't happen enough. They have all this stuff to reassure them that they're right and what they're doing to us is wrong. But even they don't believe it. You know who believes it? Coons, sellouts, bootleg Negroes believe, white folk don't even believe their lies they tell. The greatest weapon that these people have at keeping us fucked up like we are is our psychological and spiritual desire or willingness or weakness to be enslaved to them, either through drugs or you got to have some interracial sexual access, whatever it is. You want to fit in, whatever. It's despicable, okay? That's a big part of how this goes on. And these folks spend nights trying to think about how to keep us fucked up like we are. And they're getting a lot of help from how we're acting. To the delight of Southern warriors who love to defend by attacking, sounds familiar, colorblind pro-slavery theorists decried Yankee free labor as economically exploitative and politically disastrous. By giving laborers the ballot, but no other protections against exploitation, Northerners invited an electoral revolution against exploiters. After the revolution of the rabble would become the lawlessness of the mob. Yet this satisfying assault on Northern sins remained forbidden fruit. The majority of Southern citizens, slaveholding lovers of egalitarianism and despisers of blacks, would never vote to reduce themselves to black slavery. Only in the oldest, crustiest South and coastal South Carolina and the pockets of Tidewater, Virginia, did the colorblind natural outcome of slaveholding outre and a naturally non-racist way to rally all whites dominate the climatic pro-slavery argument, and usually only of a few sentences in a short pamphlet. Only Tidewater's George Fitzhugh wrote a book-length pleas for enslaving all lower classes. Fitzhugh could not have had a more merry or savage polemicist. The Virginian tore into abolitionists, alias communists, and capitalists, alias cannibals. Then he invited his foes to be his amused correspondents. A ferocious fanatic to be so amiable needed serenity about his superiority. Fitzhugh cockily belonged. He was, after all, Fitzhugh, that great name in oldest Virginia. His latest offspring of 2 centuries of blue bloods lived in rickety old mansions situated on the fag end of a once noble estate. His slim form, slick back hair, Roman nose, and patriarchal profile seemed at odds with his well-used apparel. But nothing was shabby about his links to a first family or his pride in Eastern Virginia's ancient patriarchy. George Fitzhugh confidently challenged Northern rich men to ignore his case for enslaving poor men, urging them to cherish his delightful, if you will, horrifying colorblind slogans. Fitzhugh's were the eye-catching slogans of a journalist. Because he had inherited everything except cash, he struggled to keep his fag end of the old estate. To scrape for dollars, he practiced freelance political journalism and its 19th century Siamese twin, chasing political patronage. To sell occasional pieces, he wrote explosive prose. Thereafter, he collected his zany explosions in a book, usually without revision, even when his verbal strikes devastated each other. The amusement of reading his fireworks in the newspapers evolved into every sport of reading his roller coaster books and fun of imagining George Fitzhugh chuckling at his own daffy somersaults on colorblind slavery. George Fitzhugh's very title pages assaulted free labor capitalism with sound bites. Sociology for the South, or The Failure of a Free Society, 1854, was followed by Cannibals All or Slaves Without Masters, 1857. These titles announced that the defense of mere Negro slavery was mankind's most absurdly unattainable position. If only blacks should be enslaved, why did Southerners enslave whites? According to Southern laws, masters owned their female slaves' children. According to Southern practice, generation after generation of enslaved women, after sleeping with white men, produced whiter and whiter offspring, still legally enslaved. Men with white skins, with as white skins as any of us, were held in slavery in every state of the South. White-skinned slaves also pervaded Scripture. If only blacks should be bondsmen, God was a sinner. By his express command, Hebrews enslaved whites. Greeks and Romans also enslaved whites. Fitzhugh would rather chuck the Negroes than the Bible and the ancients. The Virginian would also rather chuck the Negro than abandon the colorblind principle of slavery. The will of the superior controls and directs the will and the actions of the inferior. Superior's controlling willpower, Fitzhugh claimed, made slavery a peculiar, not to the mere South or to the mere Negro, but universal in every nation, in every family, in every factory. 9/10 of the government was slavery, even in so-called free societies. Married women, sailors, soldiers, wards, apprentices are not covered by laws, but by the will of superiors. Fitzhugh contrasts the universality of superiors' overweening willfulness, alias slavery, with the rarity of responsibility dominators, alias Southern slaveholders. Northern employers, unlike Southern masters, felt obligated only to protect their profits. The resulting dreadful wages and horrendous unemployment showed that man, isolated and individualized, is a devil. Satanic Yankees considered slavery the ultimate restraint on their beloved individualism. But attacks on the ultimate restraint would widen into attacks on all restraints. If slaves should be free of protective masters, wives should be free of protective husbands. Children free of protective parents, parishioners free of protective preachers, and governed free of protective governors. Let me repeat that, the governed free of protective governors. Then all superiors would be free to savage all inferiors. Previous protected inferiors would also be free today before tomorrow succumbing to a non-protective exploiter. A social revolution certainly impends throughout a free society, and that revolution directed at first against Negro slavery now proposes to destroy all protectors, all religion, all government, and all private property. Fitzhugh satirizes proponents of abolishing slavery, alias proponents of abolishing all protective hierarchies of a small squad of half-starved, half-naked Frenchmen, infidel Germans, flanked by a crowd of unsexed women and free Negroes screaming, "Give us liberty or give us death." Only an individual's liberty to be selfish is recognized by philosophers, abolitionists, wise women, free lovers, geologists, free Negroes, agrarians, anarchists, Jeffersonians, spiritualists, Millerites, Mormons, Chartists, fishwomen, proletarians, cannibals, sans-culottes, red Republicans, black, ditto, and Yankees. The real abolitionists are socialists of the darkest dye, anti-marriage, anti-chastity. Indeed, sir, half the North is partially insane, worse than France during the Reign of Terror. Fitzhugh pitted the mercies of the Southern hierarchies against the mendaces of the Northern individualism, especially when the Southern families, self-serving patriarchs, promote their own well-being by kindness to their inferiors. Wife and children, when happy, made the head of the family merrier. Selfishness made the merrier protector loving kind to his horse and to his cattle, which are useful to him, and to his dog, which is of no use. He loves them because they are his. Slaves are also his, a domestic affection which all men feel for what belongs to them and what is dependent on them, thus become nature's Magna Carta, which shields, protects, and provides for wives, children, and slaves. The slaveholding mentality fostered a layer upon hierarchical layer of Southern schools, churches, families, and governments, all featuring beneficent protections of grateful dependents, and the anti-hierarchical North, in contrast, the supposedly free laborer now, and soon the wife and the child, stood shivering, liberated from protectors. The question was thus stark: should inferiors be liberated to be crushed, or should superiors be enshrined to protect inferiors? One set of ideas, soared Fitzhugh, will govern the civilized world. Slavery will everywhere be abolished or everywhere be reinstituted. He was quite intent on abolishing free society, he told abolitionists, as you were on abolishing slavery. So Fitzhugh was intent on enslaving all American laborers, North and South, black and white. The Virginian ever renounced that inescapable and inescapably politically disastrous outcome of his flight beyond the mere Negro. Again and again, he sped right back to merely Negro slavery in America. In crowded Europe, Fitzhugh explained that factory workers found starvation wages inescapable, but in underpopulated America, starving laborers would escape to the West and become proprietors. Fitzhugh here anticipated Frederick Jackson Turner's safety valve argument. Turner, the renowned late 19th and early 20th century historian of the frontier, would declare the virgin western lands freed the New World from the Old World exploitation, economic and political. Fitzhugh, a half-century before Turner, cheered that the poorest Americans, when out of employment or starving, could immigrate to a great West, there to become well-fed farmers by making oppression intolerable. Eastern capitalists drive population westward, preventing the excessive accumulation on the Atlantic, and open up the desert spots of the earth for the residences of man. In a very new and sparsely settled country such as America, wage slavery would remain the greatest human blessing until the Northwest is peopled. But how long until the Northwest would be crowded and the Northeast enslaved? In his first book, Fitzhugh declared that until meant soon. The flood of immigrants to the North, he wrote in The Sociology of the South, made the situation of the laborers at the North as precarious as in Europe, but later in Cannibals All, Fitzhugh declared that since America had vast unsettled territories, many centuries may elapse before the nation would need to abolish free labor. The more Fitzhugh thought about it, the more the centuries multiplied. A thousand years may elapse, he declared in DeBow's review, before all lands between the Atlantic and the Pacific are settled and monopolized, and the affluent population is pouring back on the East. Why anticipate evils that may never happen? The North's situation, applauded the North's severest critic, was natural, healthful, and progressive. The stunning admission apparently made Southern slavery indefensible. If no black should be enslaved merely because he was Negro, and if no dependent laborer should be enslaved when he could become an independent farmer, black laborers should be free to light out for the territories. In the vast, sparsely peopled southwestern domains of Texas, Arkansas, and Mississippi, free blacks could become productive pioneers. To escape the colorblind heresy, Fitzhugh clutched a color-infested orthodoxy in sociology for the South. The Virginian called blacks freedom, but the wild and vicious license of the fox, the wolf, or the hawk. Particularly Negro slavery would be changed immediately to some form of peonage, serfdom, or villeinage if the Negroes were sufficiently intelligent and provident to manage a farm. But the Negro was a child and must be governed as a child. Fitzhugh reiterated in Cannibals All, the Negro has neither energy nor enterprise. His improvident habits turn liberty into a curse to himself and a greater curse to the society around him. As Fitzhugh summed up his surrender to merely black slavery, no sane man in America proposes to make slaves of white men, but as well send monkeys to settle, reclaim, and cultivate the far west as free Negroes, even America. Negroes should be slaves. With this journey straight away and straight back to mere Negro slavery, Fitzhugh completed the rollicking grand tour. His passage away from racist slavery exposed Northern capitalism's colorblind inequities to the delight of Yankee-hating Southern reactionaries. His pilgrimage back to racial enslavement exposed American freedom's cover-infested qualification to the delight of black-hating Southern rednecks. Yet Fitzhugh, like James Hammond, came back to the saving racial bunker without proving racial inferiority. With that omission, Fitzhugh's wild ride through the intellectual universe shot past its tracks. Only pro-slavery racists could produce that prayed-for universal Southern belief, and only if their biological proof could prevent a colorblind conclusion that blacks should go west, young man, go west in order to share the American individualistic glory. Let's see, because it's almost 12:30. Let me see, I got about 8 pages to go. Should I stop? Because I can pick this back up later. Y'all want me to stop? Because I don't mind stopping. It's 12:22. And I can pick back up here. I promise to come back to this because it gets better. This thing just gets better and better and better the closer you get to 1860. The kind of history, in fact, there's a really good chapter that is like, damn, re-enslaving free blacks, which is short. And in fact, I'm going to come back to this. You know what? Let me stop here. But I gave you a taste of this book. I'm going to stay in this for a minute. And I'm going to come and read more of this later today. So, maybe in the morning, I'm going to give it a couple hours. Watch some film noir. Everybody in Twitter, hi to you. I will be doing this later. I'm Dr. Randy Short of the Angry Black Men's Book Club, and we read books and we try to wake up people. The book I'm reading from, and I will pick back up, is called The Road to Disunion. You can get it on Amazon Audible if you don't like reading. If you like reading, read it. It's just fascinating. And I'm just thinking, nobody has told me, hey Star, can I finish the last few pages so I can complete this chapter? Okay, I can stop. I don't mind stopping. It all depends. If not, I'm going to pick back up and start reading in the morning. This was like, wow. This is just some crazy, hateful, nasty stuff. And this gets, the further you go, the more intense this gets. But I didn't want to pick out, I want you to have a background in this. There's a chapter on Caribbean delusions. And this is deep, y'all. This is deep. And this talks about folks wanting to invade other countries, trying to go over and take countries over in the Caribbean. I mean, just major bullshit, trying to reopen the slave trade to Africa. It's all about how we've been messed with. Don't believe them. Anyway, I've been saying I was going to read this, and I'm going to keep reading. I'm going to stop now because it's about 12:30. And I've been at this for most of it, it's been about 3 hours. I'm going to leave this on the page, and I'm going to come back and pick this up. I will send out a notice, okay, and absolutely retweet this, share it, get people thinking. Gotta read. People that read lead. Y'all really need to understand, because we now have neo-Confederates on both sides, Democrat and Republican, if you see where the country's moving. And, I want to say to this, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, black masses, happy birthday to you. 60 years ago today, black folks rose in rebellion in the Watts community of Los Angeles. It was one of the more serious situations. Before I leave you, because that's how this day is starting, let me put this Watts thing on here. So, and there's all kinds of stuff on Watts, but Watts riots refer to the Watts Rebellion. The Watts uprising took place in the Watts neighborhood and its surrounding areas of Los Angeles from August 11th to the 16th in 1965. 60 years ago today, folks are bitching and complaining about the very same problems we have now. And what's happened in the past 60 years is that they trusted the two-party system, and we didn't work out how we're going to move forward. And we're worse off now. Back then, Los Angeles had a really nice-sized black population. They've been completely displaced. Wake up. We don't need to spend another 60 years. Things will get worse. We may not be here. If the Palestinians can be killed in real time and the whole world know about it, where's the cavalry for black Americans? I don't know of any. Better wake up, strap up, unite up, get on code, respect self, and reparations, unity, own land, farm, do something. Do it before you can't do it anymore. Let me stop. I'm going to come back to this in a couple of hours. If you guys want, I'll treat you like you're white. Okay. Let me let you go. MFM, and let me stop. So there'll be a replay. For all of you in Twitter, look for me on the Angry Black Men's Book Club and YouTube. The Angry Black Men's Book Club. You can't miss me. You absolutely can't miss me. And like, share, subscribe, donate. I thank people like Sister Star and all the other people. So when people send me donations, I tend to buy books and I read them. In particular stuff I think it would be useful. So let me stop here. I'm going to shut down Twitter. So yeah, get fired up. So that was on Twitter. I just love that. That was really cool. I love that. Kunabama. Let me stop here. They always block this channel. I don't care. I put up anyway. I'm not scared. I don't care. I don't care about you. Good. That's cool.